Hello guys, welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash defeated Leon and his prize was marriage to Sonia, Nessa, and B. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Monarch and the Claws. The air in Winden Stadium was a physical thing, a thick, superheated mixture of ozone, sweat, and screaming. Every light, every camera, every pair of eyes in the known world was focused on the two figures at the center of the ravaged battlefield. On one side, Leon, the unbeatable champion of Galar, stood with his hands on his hips, his signature cape torn and singed, a grim smile plastered on his face as if to hold back the strain. His Charizard was a monster of flame and fury, wings beating defiance against the air, its roar a promise of immolation. On the other side stood Ash Ketchum. He wasn't smiling. His face, smudged with dirt and lit by the incandescent glow of Leon's Pokémon, was a mask of pure, unadulterated focus. He had come too far, fought too long, to lose himself in the noise now. His jacket was gone, discarded somewhere in the chaos, leaving him in a simple black t-shirt that did nothing to hide the lean, honed physique of a trainer who lived his battles as much as he commanded them. At his feet, Pikachu was a small, golden bundle of defiant energy, sparks snapping from his red cheeks, his body trembling not with fear, but with the sheer, untamed power thrumming just beneath his skin. "You're a marvel, Ash." Leon's voice boomed, amplified by the stadium speakers, yet carrying a genuine, breathless quality. "No one has ever pushed Charizard this far. But this is it. The final curtain. G-Max Wildfire." The command was the trigger. Red light erupted from Leon's Dynamax band, swirling into the sky and crashing down into his partner. Charizard swelled, growing until he blotted out the stadium lights, his form shifting into the terrifying, magnificent shape of his Gigantamax form. Wings of pure flame unfurled, and its roar became a cataclysmic event, shaking the very foundations of the arena. The crowd's roar became a single, continuous wave of sound. This was it. The signature move. The one that had ended so many challengers' dreams. Ash didn't flinch. He didn't look up at the colossal creature of living fire. He looked at Pikachu. Their eyes met, and in that instant, a silent conversation passed between them, a decade of trust and 1,000 battles culminating in this single, impossible moment. There was no strategy left to analyze, no type advantage to exploit. There was only instinct. "Pikachu, you ready?" Ash's voice was low, calm, a stark contrast to the pandemonium around them. "Pika." The response was sharp, certain. "Then let's show them our full power. Let's go." Ash didn't yell a move name. He didn't need to. He thrust his arm forward, and a rainbow of light exploded from the Z-Power ring on his wrist, a relic of a past journey brought forth for this ultimate test. Energy, pure and iridescent, flowed from Ash into his partner. It was not the overwhelming force of Dynamax, but something more concentrated, more personal. Pikachu was enveloped in a blinding golden aura. He didn't grow in size, but in presence. The very air around him seemed to warp, the raw power coalescing into a sphere of electrical fury that crackled with the energy of 10,000 thunderclouds. "The 10 million volt thunderbolt," a commentator screamed, his voice breaking with disbelief. "He's meeting a Gigantamax move with a Z move. The sheer energy output is unprecedented." High in a VIP box, Sonia's fingers tightened on her teacup, her knuckles white. She wasn't watching as a fan. She was watching as a scholar, and what she was seeing defied all known principles of Pokémon battle energy. "The Galar particles in the stadium's core are resonating with both of them," she murmured, her eyes wide. "It's acting as an amplifier. The levels they're off the charts. It's unstable." Her grandmother, Professor Magnolia, placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "It's the will of the trainer, Sonia. That is a variable you can never quantify." In another box across the stadium, Bee sat alone, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her expression was like carved stone. She watched the collision of energies not with awe, but with a critical, analytical eye. She saw Leon's overwhelming power, a blunt instrument of destruction. Then she saw Ash's technique. The timing. The perfect synergy. The absolute, insane risk of meeting a wave of fire that could melt steel with a single, focused bolt of lightning. It was reckless. It was chaotic. It was, she had to admit, breathtakingly strong. From her prime seat near the royal box, Nessa watched the spectacle with a practiced, serene smile, though her heart hammered against her ribs. The drama was exquisite. The story unfolding was perfect. The unbeatable king and the indomitable challenger, two forces of nature colliding. It was a marketer's dream, a legend being born in real time. She understood the power of a narrative, and the one Ash Ketchum was writing was the stuff of history. Down on the field, the world turned to fire and light. Charizard's G-Max wildfire was not a simple flamethrower. It was a phoenix-shaped tsunami of fire that erupted from its wings, consuming everything in its path. It wasn't just heat, it was a physical pressure wave, the air itself seeming to ignite as it swept across the field. Pikachu didn't run. He didn't dodge. He leaped forward, a tiny golden missile aimed at the heart of the inferno. The sphere of electricity around him pulsed, and then, with a deafening crack that sounded like the sky tearing in two, it erupted. A colossal bolt of lightning, woven from strands of red, yellow, blue, and green, shot forth. It didn't just meet the fire, it pierced it. For a moment, the two forces held each other in check. The stadium was caught in a stalemate of impossible energies. Half the field was a raging sea of orange and red, the other a brilliant, blinding web of pure electricity. The sound cut out, replaced by a high-frequency hum that vibrated in everyone's bones. The lights flickered and died, leaving the arena lit only by the apocalyptic struggle at its center. Deep beneath the stadium, in the Galar particle plant that powered the entire city of Wyndon, a technician watched a monitoring screen in confusion. A single, hair-thin line of violet energy spiked on his display, an anomaly so far outside normal parameters that he tapped the screen, assuming it was a sensor malfunction. The line vanished as quickly as it had appeared. He shrugged, attributing it to the unprecedented power surge from the battle above, and turned back to his coffee. On the field, Ash leaned forward, his whole body tense, pouring every ounce of his will, his hope, his entire journey into that one attack. More, he roared, his voice raw. Pikachu. Pikachu heard. With a final, defiant cry, he unleashed the last of his reserves. The 10 million volt thunderbolt pulsed, swelled, and then, with a final, explosive surge, it broke through. The bolt of lightning tore through the heart of the G-Max wildfire, scattering the flames like leaves in a hurricane. It struck the Gigantamax Charizard square in the chest. The colossal Pokémon shuddered, its fiery wings sputtering. For a second, it hung in the air, a stunned giant, before it began to shrink, the red Dynamax energy bleeding away into the air. It crashed to the field with a ground-shaking thud, back in its normal form, unconscious. Silence. A total, deafening, absolute silence fell over Wyndon Stadium. The hum was gone. The only light was the emergency lighting that now flickered on, casting long, eerie shadows. The only sound was the harsh, ragged breathing of Ash Ketchum. Pikachu, drained, wobbled and fell. Ash was there in a flash, scooping him up, holding his partner close. "You did it, buddy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You did it. We did it." Pikachu managed a weak cha, and nuzzled into his chest. Then, the referee, his face pale with shock, slowly raised his flag. Charizard is unable to battle. The winner, and new monarch of the World Coronation Series, is Ash Ketchum. The silence shattered. The noise that replaced it was not just a cheer, it was a physical eruption of human emotion, a sound wave that seemed to lift the very roof off the stadium. It was the sound of history being broken. The unbeatable champion had fallen. A new king was crowned. Leon stared at his fallen Charizard, then looked across the field at Ash. The forced smile was gone, replaced by a look of stunned, genuine respect. He walked forward, his step steady, and recalled his partner with a gentle red light. He met Ash in the center of the field. The world watched as Leon, the picture of grace in defeat, took off his crown-like hat and offered his hand. "You have a champion time, Ash," he said, his voice quiet but carried by the mic on his collar. "You and your Pokémon, your bond is the strongest I have ever seen. You are truly, without a doubt, the most powerful trainer in the world." Ash, still holding Pikachu, shook his hand, his mind a whirlwind. "You too, Leon. That was the greatest battle of my life." The ceremony that followed was a blur. Officials swarmed the field. The trophy, a magnificent golden sculpture, was brought out. Ash's other Pokémon, Dragonite, Gengar, Lucario, Sirfetch'd, and Dracovish, were released from their Pokeballs, and they swarmed him, a joyous, chaotic pile of victory. He saw his friends in the crowd, Go, Chloe, Hop, losing their minds. He saw a feed on the Jumbotron of his mom and Professor Oak, tears streaming down their faces back in Pallet Town. He was lifted onto a platform, the trophy thrust into his hands. He raised it high, and the roar of the crowd washed over him, a feeling so immense, so powerful, it felt like he could fly. This was it. The dream he had chased since he was a 10-year-old boy. He was a Pokémon master. It was in the blinding glare of the spotlights, amidst the confetti and the thunderous applause, that a figure stepped forward, silencing the celebration with a raised hand. He was a man Ash didn't recognize. Tall, severe, with silver-streaked hair and wearing an immaculately tailored suit that seemed out of place on the battlefield. This was Chairman Tarleton, the man who had quietly succeeded the disgraced Chairman Rose. His face was unsmiling, his demeanor that of a man delivering a verdict, not a commendation. "A moment, if I may," Tarleton's voice was crisp and authoritative, cutting through the noise. The stadium quieted, confused. "On behalf of the Galar Pokémon League and its governing body, I offer my congratulations to our new monarch, Ash Ketchum." He paused, letting the title hang in the air. Monarch. Not just champion. "The battle we have witnessed today was more than a simple contest of skill," Tarleton continued, his voice gaining a somber gravity. "According to our energy readings, the clash between Leon's Gigantamax Charizard and Ash's partner Pokémon produced the single largest concentration of non-Eternatus-related Galar particle energy since the darkest day." A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd. In Galar, any mention of the darkest day was cause for concern. Our history has taught us that such overwhelming power is a double-edged sword. It can protect our region, or it can endanger it. The ancient charters of Galar, penned by our first kings, foresaw such a day. They wrote of a time when a champion would arise whose power was so immense, it could warp the very fabric of our reality, a power capable of attracting forces we cannot comprehend. Ash stood, trophy in hand, a sense of unease creeping over him. Where was this going? He looked over at Leon, who seemed just as confused. "To safeguard our future," Tarleton declared, his voice ringing with cold finality, "the Galar Council has voted unanimously to reinstate a long-dormant but never repealed provision of the Galar Charter. I speak of the Guardian Clause." In her box, Sonia went rigid. "No," she breathed, the word a puff of disbelief. "He can't. That's a ceremonial law. It's archaic, it hasn't been invoked in over 1,000 years." Tarleton's eyes swept the stadium, finally landing on Ash. "The Guardian Clause states that when a monarch of world-altering power is crowned, a champion whose strength is deemed to be on a scale with the legendary heroes themselves, they are no longer merely a trainer. They become a pillar of Galar itself. And to secure the region, that pillar must be bound to its other foundations." He gestured to the VIP sections. Spotlights flared to life, illuminating 3 separate boxes, plastering the shocked faces of their occupants onto the jumbotrons for the world to see. To that end, Tarleton announced, his voice devoid of any emotion, the monarch must forge a permanent guardian union. A political and elemental bond to ensure Gaylor's stability and prosperity for the next generation. A bond with the three vital heads of our modern society. The first spotlight held Sonia, who looked as if she'd been struck by lightning. The shattered remains of her teacup lay at her feet. With the head of our historical and scientific advancement, whose knowledge guards our past and future, Professor Sonia. The second spotlight found Nessa. Her serene smile was gone, replaced by a mask of cold, controlled fury. The phone in her hand was gripped so tightly it looked like it might crack. With the head of our commerce, culture, and public spirit, whose influence guides our people, gym leader Nessa. The third spotlight landed on the solitary, stoic figure of B. Her arms were no longer crossed. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides, her knuckles bone white. Her eyes, fixed on Ash, were glacial. If looks could kill, the new monarch would have been reduced to ash. And with the head of our regional defense and martial prowess, whose strength protects our borders, gym leader B. Tarleton turned back to Ash, whose smile had long since vanished, replaced by a look of utter, profound shock. The trophy suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Congratulations, Monarch Ash Ketchum. Your victory has earned you more than a title. It has earned you the greatest responsibility our region can bestow. By the ancient and unbreakable laws of Gaylor, your prize for becoming the world champion is a mandated marriage to these three women, to form the new guardian council that will protect Gaylor for a new age. The statement dropped into the stadium like a neutron bomb. The cheering, the music, the celebration, it all ceased. For the second time that night, Wyndon Stadium was plunged into a stunned, absolute silence. The only sound was the flutter of confetti, now seeming like funeral ashes, drifting down onto the field. Ash's mind failed to process the words. Marriage? To Sonia? To Nessa? To B? He looked from Tarleton's severe face to the jumbotrons, to the three women frozen in their own personal hells of public exposure. He saw Sonia's intellectual horror, Nessa's PR nightmare made manifest, BEA's warrior pride being trampled into dust. They weren't people to this man, to this law. They were assets. Prizes. Foundations. And he, Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town, who had just achieved his life's dream, was no longer a person either. He was a pillar. A monarch. A cage keeper. The cameras zoomed in on his face, broadcasting his stunned confusion to billions. Reporters were screaming, their voices a chaotic jumble of questions. Security, Gaylor League enforcers in stern uniforms, began to move towards him, forming a cordon, separating him from his Pokemon, from his friends, from his old life. He looked past the lights, past the chaos, and his eyes met BEA's. Her glare hadn't softened. It had intensified, promising retribution. He looked at Nessa, who had already turned away, her back rigid as she spoke furiously into her phone. He looked at Sonia, who was being held up by her grandmother, her face pale and drawn. He had won. He had defeated the unbeatable Leon and become the strongest trainer in the world. And his prize was a prison. As the security detail gently but firmly began to escort him off the field, away from the life he knew, Ash looked back at the empty arena floor. The cheers were gone. The glory was gone. All that remained was the confetti-strewn dirt, the lingering smell of ozone, and the crushing, suffocating weight of a crown he had never asked for, a crown that bound him not just to a title, but to the stolen futures of three women he barely knew. He was alone, surrounded by thousands, the loneliest monarch in the world. Chapter 2, Three Queens, One Cage. The transition from the roar of the stadium to the silent glide of the elevator was a deafening shock to the system. Ash stood, the ridiculously oversized trophy now sitting on the plush carpet at his feet, as the glass lift ascended the spine of Rose Tower. Wyndon sprawled below him, a breathtaking tapestry of lights, but he felt no connection to it. He was seeing it through the thick, impenetrable glass of a display case. Pikachu was on his shoulder, the weariness of their battle finally settling in, his small body a warm, familiar weight against Ash's neck. Two stone-faced League enforcers stood with them, their expressions unreadable, their presence a constant, suffocating reminder of his new status. He wasn't a guest, he was cargo. They arrived at the penthouse suite, the Monarch Suite, a place of obscene luxury that Leon had probably called home. The doors opened onto a cavernous living area with floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture that looked more like art than something to be sat on, and an unnerving, sterile silence. "Your personal effects from the locker room are in the master bedroom," one of the enforcers stated, his voice flat. "A full staff is on call. Your Rotom phone has been updated with the necessary contacts. You are not to leave the tower without a security detail. Chairman Tarleton will be in touch tomorrow to discuss the preliminary arrangements." Arrangements. The word landed like a stone in Ash's gut. He nodded, unable to form a reply. The enforcers gave a curt nod back and retreated, the doors closing with a soft, final hiss, locking him in. He was alone. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, the sound swallowed by the massive room. He nudged the trophy with his foot. It was supposed to be the culmination of everything. Now it just looked like a piece of gilded scrap metal. "Well, buddy," he murmured, stroking Pikachu's head. "This is not how I pictured it." Pikachu gave a tired sigh, a soft Pikachu that echoed his trainer's sentiment. Ash walked to the window, placing his hands on the cool glass. The city was celebrating his victory. He could see distant flashes from fireworks displays in public squares. They were celebrating him, the monarch, the hero. They had no idea he was a prisoner, bound by a law so old it felt like a ghost story. His mind raced. He had to talk to them. Sonia, Nessa, B. He had to make them understand he was on their side. This wasn't his choice. He'd find a way to fix it. He had to. His thoughts were cut short by the ding of the private elevator at the other end of the suite. He tensed. It wasn't supposed to be used without his authorization. The doors slid open, and a figure emerged. It was B. She wasn't wearing her gym uniform. She was in a simple gray training Uwagi and black pants, her feet bare. Her hair was tied back severely, and her face was a thundercloud of controlled rage. She hadn't bypassed security, she had simply walked through it as if it wasn't there, a presence so intimidating that no one had dared to stop her. She saw Ash, and her eyes, dark and sharp as obsidian chips, narrowed. She didn't say a word. Her hand went to her belt, and with a flick of her wrist, a poke ball appeared in her palm. She crushed the release button with her thumb. In a flash of red light, her graplock materialized on the polished marble floor, its tentacles coiling and uncoiling, its single, intense eye fixing on Pikachu. Ash's own instincts, honed over 1,000 battles, took over. The shock and confusion evaporated, replaced by the familiar, cold clarity of a challenge. He didn't need words to understand what this was. This was the only language she was willing to speak right now. "Pikachu, you're too tired," he said, gently lifting his partner and setting him down on a nearby sofa. Pikachu protested with a weak spark, but Ash was firm. "Rest. I've got this." He reached for his own belt, his fingers finding the cool metal of a familiar pokeball. "Okay, B. If this is how it has to be." He threw it, and Lucario appeared in a shimmer of blue light, landing in a low crouch, his senses already flaring, his crimson eyes locked on the graplocked. An aura of calm readiness emanated from him. B finally spoke, her voice low and dangerous, each word bitten off. "They say you're the most powerful trainer in the world. They say your power is so great it requires you to be managed." She spat the word like poison. "That it requires us as your collateral." "B, I didn't know," Ash started, holding up a hand. "I would never." "Don't," she snapped. "Don't talk. I don't want to hear your excuses. I don't want to hear your apologies. I am not a trophy. I am not a political asset to be awarded to the winner of a tournament. My life, my strength, it is my own. Forged by me. Earned by me. She took a half step forward, her body coiled like a spring. I want to see it. This world-altering power. I want to feel the strength of the man who thinks he has the right to claim me as a prize. I don't think that. Ash's voice was sharp, cutting through her tirade. I'm as trapped in this as you are. That law is insane. Then prove it, she yelled, her control finally cracking, her voice echoing in the cavernous suite. Show me the power that trapped us all. Show me that you're not just some lucky kid who stumbled into a crown. Graplocked, liquidation. There was no referee, no rules. Just raw, unadulterated combat. Graplocked surged forward, its tentacles blurring as two of them became coated in a sheath of high-pressure water. It moved with the fluid, deceptive speed of a master martial artist, closing the distance in an instant. Lucario, double team, then bone rush. Ash commanded. Lucario vanished, replaced by a dozen illusory copies that scattered across the room, weaving between the expensive furniture. The real Lucario reappeared behind Graplocked, a staff of pure blue aura energy already materializing in his paws. He swung it in a vicious arc. B was unimpressed. Don't play games. Detect. Graplock's eye flashed. It didn't even turn around. One of its free tentacles shot backward, a prehensile whip that perfectly intercepted the bone rush, wrapping around the aura staff and yanking. Lucario was pulled off balance, dragged forward, right into the waiting trap. Octolock. BEA's command was cold as ice. In a move of terrifying speed and precision, Graplock's other tentacles shot out, ensnaring Lucario's limbs and torso. The Jujutsu Pokémon was completely immobilized, its own strength turned against it. The grip tightened, a relentless, crushing pressure. You rely on tricks and overwhelming power, B said, her voice dropping back to its dangerously low level as she watched her Pokémon work. I rely on technique. On discipline. On finding the fulcrum and breaking my opponent. Is this your power, Monarch? A flash of light and nothing to back it up. Lucario grunted, struggling against the unbreakable hold. Ash felt a phantom of his partner's pain through their aura connection. B was right. He had been careless, underestimating the sheer technical skill before him. This wasn't a stadium battle. This was a close-quarters brawl, and Graplocked was the master of it. You're right, Ash said, his voice calm. He closed his eyes for a second, focusing, pushing past the anger and the frustration, connecting with Lucario on a deeper level. He didn't just see his partner, he felt him. The strain in his muscles, the pressure on his ribs, the flow of his aura. Stay calm, he projected. Feel my energy. We do this together. Lucario's struggles ceased. He relaxed into the hold, conserving his strength. BEA's eyes narrowed slightly. A subtle shift. Giving up. Focusing, Ash corrected, opening his eyes. They were burning with intensity. You think this is just about power? It's about connection. Lucario, close your eyes. Feel it. Not with your senses. With your aura. Now. Aura sphere. It was an impossible command. Lucario's arms were pinned. But he didn't need his arms. He brought his paws together, millimeters from his own chest, inside Graplock's crushing embrace. A ball of pulsating blue energy formed between them. It wasn't large, but it was intensely concentrated, a miniature star of pure aura. BEA's eyes widened in realization. Graplocked, throw him. Too late. Lucario didn't launch the sphere. He detonated it. The point-blank explosion of aura energy sent both Pokémon flying in opposite directions. There was no escape for Graplocked, it took the full, focused blast to its torso. It slammed into the far wall with enough force to crack the marble paneling, sliding to the floor, stunned. Lucario was thrown back into the window, which groaned under the impact but held, before he landed gracefully on his feet, shaking his head to clear it. That was reckless, Bea breathed, her fury momentarily replaced by shock. You could have seriously injured your own Pokémon. He trusted me, Ash said simply. And I trust him. We're not done. Lucario, Steel Beam. It was an absurdly powerful move to use in an enclosed space. A gamble. A statement. Lucario roared, and a massive beam of molten, silvery light erupted from his chest, aimed directly at the dazed Graplock. Protect. Bea countered, her composure returning. A green barrier shimmered into existence around Graplock, but the steel beam was relentless. The shield buckled, cracking under the immense pressure. Ash saw the strain on Graplock, the recoil damage flashing over Lucario. This was a battle of attrition now. Keep pushing. Ash urged. Break through it. Bea commanded, her own competitive fire now fully stoked. This was no longer just an interrogation by combat, it was a real fight, and her pride wouldn't let her lose. The protect barrier shattered. But in that split second, Graplock had recovered enough to dive to the side, the steel beam missing it by inches and blasting a huge, blackened hole in the wall where it had been. The attack had served its purpose. It had been a feint, a way to force a defensive move and create an opening. Now, extreme speed. Ash yelled. Before Graplock could even reorient itself, Lucario was on it, moving faster than the eye could follow. He wasn't a blue blur, he was simply there, appearing in front of the grappling Pokémon, his fist already glowing with power. But Bea was a prodigy for a reason. Her mind worked as fast as her Pokémon. She saw Ash's strategy, the feint, the opening. She saw the finishing blow coming. Close combat, she said, her voice resigned but firm. It was a desperation move, but it was also a statement of defiance. Graplock met Lucario's attack with a furious flurry of its own, tentacles striking from all angles. The center of the room became a storm of blows, the crack of fist on flesh and tentacle on armor a brutal percussion. Lucario was faster, stronger, but Graplock was relentless, landing 2, 3, 4 stinging blows for every one Lucario landed. This was what she wanted. Not a clean victory, but a test. A brutal, head-to-head exchange of will. Ash saw it, too. He could drag this out, use Lucario's superior mobility, but that wasn't the point anymore. He had to meet her challenge head-on. He had to show her the core of his strength. One more attack, he sent to Lucario through their bond. Predict it. I've got your back. Through the flurry, Ash saw it, a subtle shift in Graplock's posture, the coiling of its strongest tentacle for a final, decisive blow. Bea saw it too, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Reversal. Ash commanded. It was the perfect counter. The more damage Lucario had taken, the stronger the move would be. Fueled by the punishment from close combat, Lucario ignored Graplock's final strike. He took the blow to his shoulder, grunting with pain, but used the momentum, twisting his body and driving his own aura-charged fist upward in a devastating uppercut that connected squarely under Graplock's chin. The octopus Pokémon went limp. Its eye rolled back, and it collapsed in a heap, unconscious. Silence returned to the trashed penthouse suite. Lucario stood over his defeated opponent, breathing heavily, covered in bruises but undeniably the victor. Bea stared at her fallen Pokémon, then back at Ash. The fire in her eyes was gone. In its place was something else, something colder and more complex. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't acceptance. It was a grudging, bitter acknowledgement. He hadn't just won. He had seen through her strategy, matched her ferocity, and demonstrated a bond with his Pokémon that was more than just commands and attacks, it was a true synthesis. The power that won you the crown, she said, her voice barely a whisper. She walked over and recalled Graplocked without another word. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. This doesn't change anything. You are still a symbol of my dishonor. But, you are not weak. She walked to the elevator, her back ramrod straight. She didn't look back as the doors closed, leaving Ash and Lucario standing in the wreckage of their battle. Ash went to his Pokémon, placing a hand on his shoulder. You were amazing, Lucario, he said. Lucario responded with a weary but proud nod. Ash surveyed the damage, the cracked floor, the hole in the wall. This was only the first of 3. And it had been the easy one. The second confrontation came less than an hour later. The hole in the wall had been hastily covered by a panel by the tower's eerily efficient staff, but the memory of the battle lingered. Ash had just finished tending to Lucario's bruises when his Rotom phone chimed. It was an encrypted message from an unknown sender. Conference Room 72B. Now. No name, no explanation. Just a command. Ash sighed. He had a feeling he knew who it was from. Leaving his recovering Pokémon to rest, he followed the directions on his phone, navigating the hushed, empty corridors of the executive floors. He found 72B, a room with a single glass wall overlooking the city. Inside, Nessa was waiting. She sat at the head of a long, obsidian black table, looking every bit the superstar model and powerful gym leader. She was flanked by a team of 4 people in sharp suits, all furiously tapping on tablets and whispering to each other. One was clearly a lawyer, another had the harried look of a publicist. They all stopped and looked up as Ash entered, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and hostility. Nessa gestured to the single empty chair at the far end of the table. A clear power play. Ash ignored it, walking halfway down the table and leaning against it, crossing his arms. It put him on her level, not at the foot of her throne. Her eyes, a striking, cool blue, assessed him for a long moment. There was no anger like BEA's. There was just cold, professional calculation. Mr. Ketchum, she began, her voice as smooth and polished as the table between them. Thank you for coming. This is my legal counsel, Marcus, and my public relations team. We have a situation. I'm aware, Ash said, his tone dry. No, Nessa countered, holding up a perfectly manicured hand. You're aware of the announcement. I am talking about the fallout. In the 57 minutes since Chairman Tarleton's proclamation, my name has been mentioned on social media over 4 million times. 82% of those mentions are negative or mocking. My primary sponsor, the Great Gaylor Fishing Conglomerate, has already put a hold on my new ad campaign, citing a violation of the moral turpitude clause in my contract. The Holbury Tourism Board is in full panic. This isn't a personal problem, Mr. Ketchum. It is a brand crisis. Ash felt a flash of irritation. Is that all this is to you? A brand crisis? The publicist, a thin man with slick back hair, scoffed. Nessa is more than a gym leader. She is an icon, a symbol of modern Gaylor. This medieval arrangement turns her into a punchline. It undermines her authority, her image of self-made success. What he means, Nessa cut in, her gaze never leaving Ash, is that my power comes from the perception of my independence and strength. This law makes me look like property. And you, by extension, are the one holding the deed. It was the same sentiment as B, just wrapped in a different package. Pride. Independence. Stolen from them. I don't want this, Ash said, his voice firm, leaning forward slightly. I don't want a mandated marriage. I don't want a guardian council. I want to go home with my trophy and my Pokémon. This is a nightmare for me, too. The lawyer, a stern-looking woman, spoke up. His personal feelings are irrelevant, Nessa. The legal precedent of the charter is the issue. It's ironclad. It predates the modern league. It's tied to the very establishment of Gaylor as a unified region. So we're stuck, Nessa stated, her mask of cool professionalism slipping for just a fraction of a second, revealing a flicker of genuine despair. She quickly composed herself. Which brings us to the purpose of this meeting. We cannot annul the law overnight. So, for now, we manage the narrative. She nodded to her publicist, who swiped on his tablet, and a holographic display appeared over the table. It was a drafted press release. Joint statement from Monarch Ash Ketchum, Professor Sonia, Gym Leader Nessa, and Gym Leader B. Ash's eyes scanned the text. It was full of corporate, meaningless drivel. Humbled by this great honor, look forward to serving the Gaylor region, a modern interpretation of a time-honored tradition. I'm not signing that, Ash said flatly. The publicist looked scandalized. It's the best angle. It reframes this from a forced arrangement to a willing partnership. It shows unity. It's a lie, Ash shot back. And it makes it sound like we're all happy about it. Are you happy about it, Nessa? Nessa's jaw tightened. My personal happiness is not the primary variable in this equation. Maybe it should be. Ash's frustration was boiling over. He was tired of being handled, managed, assessed. This isn't a business deal. This is our lives. Sonia's, BEA's, yours, mine. We shouldn't be releasing statements about how we're humbled. We should be telling them we're going to fight this. That we're going to find a way to overturn this stupid, ancient law. A stunned silence fell over the room. Nessa's team looked at him as if he'd just suggested setting fire to the league headquarters. Nessa herself just stared at him, her expression unreadable. She had expected a pawn, a simple-minded battle prodigy she could maneuver. She had not expected this blunt, absolute moral clarity. He wasn't thinking about angles or optics. He was thinking about what was right. To publicly defy the council and the charter on your first day as monarch, the lawyer began, his voice trembling slightly. It would be political suicide. You would be seen as unstable, a threat to the region's order. They could use it to strip you of the title. Good, Ash said. Let them. If it gets all of you out of this, they can have the title. I never wanted it anyway. I just wanted the battle. Nessa held up her hand, silencing her team. She studied Ash, truly seeing him for the first time. Not as the problem, but as a person. A ridiculously straightforward, impossibly earnest person who was willing to throw away the single greatest achievement in the world to do the right thing. It was so naive it was almost noble. A public declaration of war is not a viable strategy, she said, her voice softer now, less corporate. It would entrench the council. They would paint us as rebels. We would lose all public support. We need to be smarter than that. So what do you suggest? Ash asked, his own frustration receding slightly. She was at least engaging with him, not just dictating terms. For now, we need a ceasefire, Nessa said. A statement that buys us time. Not one of acceptance, but one of consideration. She looked at her publicist. Scrap that draft. Write a new one. Something simple. The announcement was a surprise to all parties involved. We are taking time to understand the full legal and personal ramifications of the Guardian Clause. A more detailed statement will be made in the coming days. That's it. Nothing more. The publicist looked horrified. But that's admitting weakness. It shows a lack of unity. It shows the truth, Nessa said, her eyes still on Ash. And it gives us room to breathe. And to think. She stood up. Send it to me for approval. And get me Chairman Tarleton's private schedule. I want to know who he's meeting with. Her team, sensing the shift in her demeanor, scrambled to comply. Nessa walked around the table until she was standing in front of Ash. You are a chaotic variable, Ash Ketchum, she said, her voice low. My team thinks you're a liability. They might be right. She paused. But you're not what I expected. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? He asked. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. I haven't decided yet. Don't make any public statements without running them by me. Don't talk to the press. Don't break any more walls. Just, try not to make things worse until I can figure out what our next move is. She turned and walked out of the room, her team trailing in her wake like pilot fish. Ash was left alone again, the holographic projector shutting off, plunging the room into moody darkness. He had survived the second confrontation. He hadn't made a friend, but he had perhaps found a reluctant, pragmatic ally. 2 down, 1 to go. And he had a feeling the last one would be the most difficult of all. He found Sonia in the tower's library. It wasn't a room, it was a sanctuary. 2 stories high, filled with the scent of old paper and leather, a place of quiet, scholarly reverence. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, and display cases held ancient artifacts, cracked tablets, faded scrolls, a knight's rusted helmet. Sonia was a whirlwind of frantic energy in the midst of this quietude. She had a mountain of books spread across a massive oak table, some open to specific pages, others flagged with dozens of sticky notes. She was pacing back and forth, muttering to herself, her hair already escaping its normally neat arrangement. She hadn't even noticed him enter. It makes no sense, she was saying to her Rotom phone, which hovered anxiously beside her. The legal framework was dissolved during the reign of King Indulf III. It was superseded by the First Guild Charter. Tarleton can't just reinstate it. There has to be a nullifying clause, a precedent, a loophole. Ash cleared his throat. Sonia jumped, whirling around. Her eyes, wide and frantic, landed on him, and her expression hardened. The frantic scholar vanished, replaced by a woman who looked at him with profound disappointment and anger. You, she said, her voice laced with an academic scorn. Sonia, I just wanted to talk, Ash said, taking a cautious step into the room. Oh, I'm sure you do, she retorted, crossing her arms. Come to gloat. To see the spoils of your victory. The head of historical and scientific advancement, she quoted Tarleton's words with dripping sarcasm. Reduced to a broodmare to ensure the elemental stability of the region. Do you have any idea how insulting that is? My entire life's work, my research, my position as a professor, all of it erased in a single sentence to satisfy some testosterone-fueled, Bronze Age piece of legal fiction. I'm not gloating. Ash insisted, his patience wearing thin. I hate this as much as you do. I just fought a battle in my living room with B because she thinks the same thing. Sonia stopped short, her eyes flicking from his face to the faint scuff marks on his clothes. You fought B. Here. She wasn't in a talking mood, Ash said grimly. Look, I came here to tell you what I told her and what I told Nessa. I will do whatever it takes to get you out of this. If I have to give up the title, I'll do it. Just tell me what to do. His earnestness seemed to take the wind out of her sails. The anger in her eyes softened, replaced by weary frustration. She sank into a chair, running a hand through her hair. It's not that simple, she sighed, gesturing to the mountain of books. That's what I've been trying to figure out. This isn't just a law. If it were, my lawyers could have it thrown out by morning. The guardian clause is something else. She tapped a heavy, leather-bound tome. This is the Liber Primus, the original Galar Charter. Most of it is boring stuff about land rights and tithes. But the guardian clause is different. The language it uses, it's not legal, it's mystical. It speaks of binding the monarch's immense life force to the cornerstones of the land. It's written less like a law and more like a spell. Ash pulled up a chair and sat opposite her, his attention fully captured. A spell. A binding ritual, Sonia corrected, her scholarly passion overriding her anger. The wording suggests that the announcement itself, made in a place of immense power like Winden Stadium right after a massive energy release, enacts the binding. It's not just a proposal of marriage, Ash. In the eyes of this ancient law, by Tarleton speaking those words, it's already done. We are tethered to you. On some fundamental, esoteric level. Ash felt a cold dread wash over him. This was far worse than he had imagined. So, we can't just say no. Saying no would be like a planet saying no to the sun's gravity, Sonia said, her voice grim. The text is vague, but it implies that severing the bond improperly could cause instability. Not just for us, but for the Galar region itself. The very energy that the law is trying to contain. Your energy. He stared at her, the full weight of the situation finally crashing down on him. He had thought it was a political problem. A legal one. But it was something far older, far more dangerous. Tarleton knew this, Ash said, the realization dawning. He didn't just reinstate a law. He cast a spell on us. He, or the people he's working with, Sonia agreed darkly. People who believe in this old magic. People who think Galar has been weakened by modern ideas and needs to be returned to its glorious roots. They see your power as a chaotic force, and they've locked it in a cage of their own design, using us as the bars. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the sheer, insane reality of their predicament hanging between them. Ash looked at the books, at the determined, terrified look in Sonia's eyes. He had come here to offer help, but he had found himself completely out of his depth. Then, his natural tenacity kicked in. He had faced down angry gods and reality-bending Pokemon. He refused to be beaten by a dusty old book. Okay, he said, his voice steady. So we can't break it. What if we follow the rules? Is there a way to undo the ritual? A counterspell? Sonia looked at him, surprised by his quick acceptance and his immediate shift to problem-solving. I don't know. I've been looking for nullification clauses. Maybe I should be looking for ritualistic escape clauses. Her energy returned in a rush. She began flipping through the pages of a different book, her fingers flying. The text is 1,000 years old. The translation is archaic. But if there's a binding, there has to be an unbinding. It's a basic principle of sympathetic magic. Let me help, Ash said. Sonia blinked. You. I can read. And you can tell me what to look for. It's better than sitting alone in my room waiting for the next person to come and yell at me. A small, genuine smile touched Sonia's lips for the first time. Okay, she said softly. Okay. Monarch. She said the word with a hint of irony, but the bite was gone. She pushed a heavy scroll towards him. Start with this. It's a series of addendums from the 7th century. Look for anything that mentions severance, release, or completion of duty. And try not to get any fingerprints on it. It's a one-of-a-kind original. For the next few hours, they worked. Ash, to his own surprise, found a rhythm. He was a surprisingly good research assistant, patient and methodical, his mind, so adept at finding patterns in battle, proving equally capable of sifting through dense, ancient text for key phrases. They worked in a comfortable silence, broken only by Sonia's occasional murmurs or Ash asking for clarification on a term. They were no longer the monarch and his prize. They were two people, united against a common, impossible problem. It was during a lull, as Sonia was cross-referencing a passage, that her Rotom phone buzzed with an alert. She glanced at it, her brow furrowing. That's odd, she murmured, more to herself than to Ash. What is it? An alert from one of the energy monitoring stations my lab maintains, she said, tapping at the screen. There have been a series of strange, localized energy spikes near Hammerlock. They're causing the wild Pokemon in the area to become unusually agitated. The signature is weird. It's not Galar particle radiation. It's almost like an absence of energy, a vacuum. She zoomed in on a graph, a thin, jagged line of violet cutting through the normal data feeds. It looked familiar. I saw that before, Ash said, leaning closer. During my battle with Leon. Just for a second, on the stadium monitors. Sonia's head snapped up, her eyes wide with alarm. You're sure? Positive. She stared at the screen, new, far more frightening theory beginning to form in her mind. The ancient texts didn't just talk about the monarch's power. They talked about what that power could attract. The clash of great powers can awaken that which slumbers, she whispered, quoting a line she'd read earlier. Sonia? Ash asked, seeing the look on her face. She shook her head, pushing the thought away for now. It was too much. One crisis at a time. It's probably just a sensor malfunction caused by the power surge from your battle. I'll have a team look into it tomorrow. But she didn't sound convinced. She saved the data, a knot of professional dread tightening in her stomach. She looked at Ash, who was already back to patiently scanning the scroll. He was a force of nature, a walking nexus of power that had just bent the world to his will, and he was sitting here, quietly helping her, because he thought it was the right thing to do. The law had bound them together to contain his power, but in that moment, Sonia felt the first stirrings of a real connection, a partnership forged not by magic, but by mutual respect and a shared, uncertain future. We'll figure this out, Ash, she said, her voice filled with a determination that hadn't been there before. Together. He looked up and gave her a small, confident smile. I know we will. Later, as dawn threatened to break over the city, Ash finally returned to his suite. The broken wall was fixed, the furniture was back in its place, as if the battle with B had never happened. But he could still feel the lingering tension in the air. He collapsed onto the sofa, utterly exhausted. He had been crowned the strongest trainer in the world less than 12 hours ago. Since then, he had fought a desperate battle against a martial arts master, navigated a public relations minefield with a superstar, and delved into ancient, magical law with a brilliant scholar. He had survived his first night as monarch. He looked out the window at the slowly lightening sky over Winden. He now understood the true nature of his gilded cage. He was fighting a war on three fronts, against Bea's anger, Nessa's pragmatism, and Sonia's intellect, all while trying to free them. And beneath it all, the unsettling hum of Sonia's discovery, the strange violet energy near Hammerlock, hinted at a fourth, unknown enemy still lurking in the shadows. He had won the battle, but the real fight, he now realized, had only just begun. Chapter 3, The Wild Hunt. The morning sun that streamed into the monarch's suite felt like an accusation. Ash stood before the vast window, a mug of coffee in his hands, watching the city of Winden come to life. On the massive screen of the wall-mounted television, a perky morning show host was dissecting the previous night's events with giddy excitement. His face was plastered next to the faces of Sonia, Nessa, and B under a shimmering, ridiculous banner that read, Gaylor's new royal family. And while the Gaylor League Council insists this is about regional security, one has to wonder about the romance, the host chirped. 3 of Gaylor's most powerful and eligible women, and the new, undisputed world champion. It's a fairy tale for the modern age. Ash grimaced and took a sip of coffee. A fairy tale. It felt more like a hostage situation. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying the battle with B, the cold negotiation with Nessa, and the late-night research session with Sonia. He felt like he'd run a gauntlet, and this was only the first day. Pikachu, perched on the back of the sofa, let out an irritated hiss at the TV. He'd had enough of the noise, too. Ash was about to turn it off when the broadcast was abruptly cut. The screen went black for a second before being replaced by the seal of the Gaylor Emergency Broadcast System, accompanied by a piercing electronic tone. We interrupt this program for an emergency bulletin, a grim, official voice announced. A state of emergency has been declared for the eastern sections of the Wild area, specifically the regions bordering Motostoke Riverbank and the Giant's Mirror. Unpredictable and violent geological tremors have been reported, causing significant structural instability. All residents in these areas are advised to evacuate to designated safe zones in Motostoke. All wild area travel is suspended until further notice. The cause of the tremors is currently under investigation. Ash set his mug down, his weariness instantly replaced by a surge of adrenaline. Tremors. Agitated Pokemon. The words echoed Sonia's discovery from last night. This wasn't a coincidence. His Rotom phone buzzed to life on the table, displaying Chairman Tarleton's severe face. Ash answered, his jaw tight. "Good morning, Monarch." Tarleton's voice was as crisp and cold as ever. "I trust you saw the broadcast." "I saw it." "What's going on?" Ash demanded. "A matter of regional security," Tarleton replied smoothly, the words a deliberate echo of the TV host. "A powerful Pokemon is rampaging and causing the instability. The Galar Defense Force has been deployed. As the newly appointed Guardian of Galar, your presence is required. A transport is waiting for you at the tower's ground-level access." It wasn't a request. It was an order, wrapped in the language of duty. The cage was reminding him of its bars. "I'm on my way," Ash said, and hung up before Tarleton could reply. He turned to Pikachu. "Looks like we're not getting a day off, buddy." Pikachu leaped from the sofa onto his shoulder, his cheeks already sparking with anticipation. The weariness was gone from him, too. This, at least, was a problem they understood. A rampaging Pokemon was a language they spoke fluently. Ash grabbed his jacket and his belt of Pokeballs, his mind already shifting into battle mode. The politics could wait. Right now, people were in danger. The command center set up in a fortified building on the outskirts of Motostoke was a hive of activity. Uniformed Galar Defense Force officers moved with brisk purpose between humming consoles and holographic maps of the wild area. It smelled of ozone and stale coffee. Ash walked in, feeling out of place in his casual gear, but the moment he entered, a hush fell over the room. They all looked at him, the monarch, the living legend, the kid from the TV. His eyes scanned the room and found them. Bee was standing before the central map, already dressed in a dark gray, tactical version of her uniform, reinforced with protective plating. She looked completely at home, her posture radiating command. She was in the middle of giving orders to a GDF captain, and her eyes flicked to Ash for a fraction of a second, her expression a mixture of annoyance and professional necessity. He was a tool she was being forced to use. More surprising was the presence of Nessa. She stood off to the side, her phone pressed to her ear, her expression one of intense, focused concern. She was dressed not in a glamorous gown or her gym uniform, but in practical, waterproof trousers and a sleek, dark blue jacket bearing the Holbury City crest. She finished her call and turned, her eyes meeting Ash's. "The Motostoke River is the primary tributary for the watershed that supplies Holbury," she stated, anticipating his question. "If its source is compromised or contaminated by these upheavals, my city could face a water crisis within days. Furthermore, several of the towns under evacuation orders are key trade partners. I'm here to coordinate the civilian response and protect my people's interests." She was a leader. Not just a model, not just a gym leader. He saw in that moment the fierce, protective instinct that drove her, and his respect for her deepened. Bee finished her briefing and walked toward them, her GDF escort following like shadows. "The situation is this," she said, dispensing with any pleasantries. She pointed to a flashing red icon on the holographic map. "Satellite imaging has identified the source. A single Tyranitar. It's far from its normal habitat, and it's exhibiting extreme aggression." A technician brought up an image on a side screen. It was grainy, taken from high orbit, but clear enough. A Tyranitar, wreathed in a sickening, pulsating violet aura. The same energy signature. "It isn't just rampaging," Bee continued, her voice tight. "It's moving with purpose, following the river north. Every time it uses a powerful move, like earthquake or stone edge, the tremors intensify, and we register a massive energy discharge. A discharge of that, unnatural power." She looked at Ash. Professor Sonia has already been in contact. She believes this creature is not acting of its own free will. It's being used as some kind of living weapon. To do what? Ash asked. To break things, B said grimly. It seems to be targeting geological fault lines. It's not just a wild animal, it's a demolitions expert. My primary objective is to neutralize the target before it reaches the Duraludin viaduct. If it destabilizes that bridge, it will cut off the main transport artery to the Northern Territories. And what's my role in this? Ash asked, already knowing the answer. BEA's jaw tightened. Chairman Tarleton has been clear. As Guardian, you are to be the primary offensive element. The GDF will provide support, but you are expected to engage the target directly. Try not to get in my way. She turned and strode toward the exit without waiting for a response. Nessa gave Ash a look, a silent acknowledgement of BEA's abrasive nature, before turning to follow. I'll be riding with you. I need to maintain communication with my teams on the ground, and your transport has the most secure comms link. Ash nodded, falling into step beside her. The three of them, the warrior, the star, and the monarch, were being forced into the field together. A reluctant, dysfunctional trinity on their first official mission. The armored transport vehicle was built for punishment, its engine rumbling as it tore through the uneven terrain of the wild area. The ride was rough, jostling them in their seats. B sat up front, monitoring a tactical display and issuing clipped commands over her headset. Nessa sat in the back with Ash, her own tablet displaying evacuation progress maps and resource allocation charts. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Outside, the wild area felt sick. The sky was an unnatural bruise color, and the usual cacophony of Pokémon calls was absent, replaced by an eerie silence. Ash saw a herd of Boltund race past in a panic, their eyes wide with terror. This wasn't just a threat, it was a corruption. Sonia's theory, Nessa said quietly, not looking up from her screen. She called me this morning. She's calling the force behind this, the Unraveler. She thinks it's an ancient entity that consumes energy. That it was drawn out of dormancy by the power released in your battle with Leon. The accusation was there, unspoken but heavy in the air. Your fault. Sonia also said she's looking for a way to undo the Guardian Clause, Ash countered, his voice low. We worked on it for half the night. Nessa finally looked up, her cool blue eyes searching his face. The information seemed to surprise her. She didn't mention that. She was a little busy, Ash said. Just like you were with your brand crisis, and B was with, well, with being B. A ghost of a smile touched Nessa's lips. She does have a unique approach to conflict resolution. She looked back at her tablet, her tone shifting back to business. The final evacuation zone has been cleared. All civilians are accounted for. But the seismologists are worried. The next fault line is directly beneath the riverbed. If the Tyranitar triggers a quake there, it could create a fissure and drain the river dry. Before Ash could respond, BEA's voice crackled over the vehicle's internal comm, we have a problem. Target's trail is cold, but I'm picking up a secondary energy spike. Dead ahead. The driver slammed on the brakes, and the transport skidded to a halt at the edge of a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a Rhydon. It was larger than average, its rocky hide covered in the same pulsing, violet veins of light as the Tyranitar. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent, empty purple light. It wasn't angry. It wasn't anything. It was just a shell, piloted by something else. That's not our primary target, BEA's voice was sharp with frustration. GDF units, ignore it. We need to find the Tyranitar. We can't just leave it, Ash argued, already opening the transport door. It'll attack the evacuation convoys. It's a distraction, catch 'em. B snapped. Then I'll be quick, Ash said, and vaulted out of the vehicle before anyone could stop him. Pikachu was already on the ground, sparks flying. The corrupted Rhydon turned its vacant gaze on them and let out a roar that didn't sound like a Pokémon. It was a distorted, grating sound, like grinding stone. It lowered its head, its horns spinning like a drill, and charged. "Jengar, I need you!" Ash yelled, tossing a Pokeball. Jengar materialized out of the shadows, a manic grin on its face. Shadow Ball. Jengar fired a globe of spectral energy that flew straight and true. But as it neared the Rhydon, something bizarre happened. The space around the Rhydon seemed to warp, and the shadow ball curved in midair, missing by a wide margin and exploding against a rock outcropping 20 feet away. From inside the transport, Bee watched on the monitor, her eyes wide. Spatial distortion, it's just like the reports. Conventional attacks are useless. Ash saw it too. Aiming at the target wasn't working. He had to think differently. "Jengar, dive into its shadow," he commanded. Jengar's grin widened. It melted into the ground, becoming one with the Rhydon's own shadow. The Rhydon paused, confused, looking around for its opponent. "Now, rise up underneath it and use Will-O-Wisp." A column of ghostly purple flames erupted from the ground directly beneath the Rhydon. The creature roared in pain as the spectral fire clung to its hide, but it was the surprise, not the damage, that created the opening. It was momentarily disoriented, its control over the space around it flickering. "Pikachu, now! Thunderbolt! Don't aim for the Rhydon, aim for Jengar." It was a classic, chaotic Ash Ketchum strategy. Pikachu leaped into the air and unleashed a powerful bolt of lightning, not at the enemy, but at his friend. The electricity struck Jengar just as it became fully corporeal again. Jengar, a ghost type immune to the damage, acted as a living conduit. The electrical energy coursed through its spectral body and discharged in a massive, uncontrolled burst in all directions, creating a localized EMP. The violet light on the Rhydon sputtered and died. Its eyes cleared, the malevolent glow vanishing, replaced by a look of dazed confusion. It shook its massive head, let out a weary groan, and collapsed, unconscious but no longer corrupted. The whole encounter had lasted less than a minute. Ash recalled Jengar, giving the Pokeball a grateful pat. "Nice work, both of you." He got back in the transport, the silence from the other occupants palpable. He looked at Bea's face on the monitor. Her mouth was a thin, hard line. She hadn't approved of his methods, but she couldn't argue with the results. He hadn't just defeated it, he had purged it, and he'd done it with a speed and ingenuity her GDF squads couldn't have matched. "Let's go find that Tyranitar," Ash said, his voice quiet but firm. Bea gave a curt nod to the driver, and the transport lurched back into motion. The hunt was back on. They found it in a narrow canyon carved by the Motostoke River. The Tyranitar was a terrifying sight, a behemoth of rock and rage, its body pulsing with that sickening violet light. It wasn't attacking them. It was systematically slamming its tail against the canyon wall, huge cracks spreading with every impact. It was trying to bring the whole cliff face down into the river. "All units, form a perimeter." Bea's voice rang out as she leaped from the transport, her Macamp already materializing beside her. "Engage with extreme prejudice." GDF troops and their Pokémon fanned out, but their attacks were futile. Blasts of water and energy beams veered off course, deflected by the spatial distortions. The Tyranitar ignored them, continuing its methodical destruction. "It's no good." Bea growled in frustration. "The distortion field is too strong. We can't land a clean hit." Her Macamp charged in, its four fists a blur, but its dynamic punch connected with empty air, the force of the blow creating a shockwave a few feet to the left of the Tyranitar's head. The cliff face groaned, a shower of rocks tumbling into the churning water below. Nessa was out of the transport now, her face pale as she watched the potential disaster unfold. "If that wall goes, the landslide will dam the river completely. We have to stop it." She sent out her own ace, a massive Dreadnought, its jaw strong enough to snap steel. "Dreadnought, get in the river. Use jaw lock on any large debris. Keep the channel clear. It was a brilliant move, defensive and practical. While BEA's forces were focused on the impossible task of attacking the Tyranitar, Nessa was mitigating the consequences. Her dreadnought plunged into the water, a bulwark against the cascading rockfall. Ash watched the scene, his mind racing. He saw BEA's direct, disciplined assault failing. He saw Nessa's pragmatic damage control. They were both doing their part, but they weren't solving the core problem. The Tyranitar was a symptom, the Unraveler's energy was the disease. He couldn't just beat the Pokémon, he had to break its connection to the corrupting force. I have an idea, he said, drawing both women's attention. We can't hit it from the outside. So we have to attack it from the inside. What are you talking about? B demanded. That energy is making it disoriented, overloading its senses. We just need to push it over the edge, Ash explained, his plan forming as he spoke. He pointed to the sky. Dragonite, up high. Use Hurricane in the canyon. His powerful Dragonite soared into the sky, its wings beating a furious rhythm. A vortex of wind began to form within the confines of the canyon, whipping up dust, water, and loose scree. The air became a chaotic, swirling mess. The Tyranitar paused its assault, roaring in frustration as the gale-force winds battered it. Now, Pikachu! Ash yelled. Ride the wind. Use Electroweb. Pikachu, a small golden blur, was lifted by the hurricane. He spun through the air, releasing a series of sticky, electrified nets. They didn't hit the Tyranitar. Instead, they were caught by the swirling winds, weaving together until they formed a massive, chaotic web of crackling energy that filled the entire canyon. He's turned the battlefield into a capacitor, Nessa breathed, her eyes wide with disbelief. All GDF units, cease fire. Fall back. B commanded, finally understanding Ash's insane strategy. She watched him, no longer with annoyance, but with a kind of stunned awe. He wasn't thinking like a trainer. He was thinking like a force of nature. The Tyranitar was now completely disoriented, trapped in a maelstrom of wind, dust, and crackling electricity. The spatial distortions around it began to flicker and fail as its concentration was broken. It's working. Ash yelled over the roar of the wind. Its defenses are down. B, now. B didn't hesitate. Macamp, full power. Focus punch. Dragonite, you too. Dragon Claw. Macamp, no longer hindered by the distortions, charged forward, all four of its fists glowing with an immense concentration of power. From above, Dragonite dove like a meteor, its claws extended and blazing with draconic energy. They struck at the same instant. Machamp's earth-shattering punch and Dragonite's powerful slash landed squarely on the Tyranitar. The creature roared, a true sound of pain this time, and the violet energy convulsed. One more push. Ash shouted, pointing to the sky. Pikachu. Aim for the web. Let it all go. Thunderbolt. From the apex of the hurricane, Pikachu unleashed the full force of his power. A colossal bolt of lightning struck the Electroweb, which acted like a massive conductor. The entire canyon lit up in a blinding flash of white light as the web discharged its stored energy in a single, omnidirectional blast. The violet aura around the Tyranitar was not just disrupted, it was violently expelled, evaporating into nothingness with a final, sickening hiss. The giant Pokémon staggered, its eyes clearing. It looked around, confused and exhausted, before its legs gave out and it crashed to the ground, defeated. The hurricane died down. The dust settled. The only sound was the rushing of the river, now flowing freely thanks to Nessa's dreadnought. They had done it. Ash, B, and Nessa stood in the quiet canyon, breathing heavily. They looked at the unconscious Tyranitar, then at each other. A silent understanding passed between them. They had faced a threat none of them could have handled alone, and they had won. Bee walked over to Ash. Her face was still stern, but the hard edge was gone. Your methods are reckless, undisciplined, and chaotic, she said, her voice low. She paused, looking at the neutralized threat. But they are undeniably effective. You saw an answer none of us did. It was the closest she could come to an apology, and to a compliment. It was enough. Nessa recalled her dreadnought, a look of profound relief on her face. She approached Ash, her usual media-ready polish replaced by genuine, weary gratitude. The river is secure. You saved Holbury from a drought, Ash. Thank you. Before Ash could respond, his Rotom phone buzzed. He answered it, putting it on speaker. It was Sonia. Ash. Are you all right? She asked, her voice frantic. I was monitoring the energy signatures. There was a massive null field event, and then, it just vanished. What did you do? We stopped it, Sonia, Ash said. The Tyranitar is down. There was a moment of silence on the other end, then a rush of excited words. Of course. You didn't just overpower it. The electromagnetic pulse from Pikachu's attack on the Electro-Ebb created a harmonic frequency that destabilized the Unraveler's hold. You didn't destroy the energy, you neutralized it. Ash, this is a massive breakthrough. They listened as Sonia's theory poured out of the phone, her words painting a terrifying picture of an enemy that consumed existence itself. But for the first time, they had a name for it, the Unraveler, and a proven way to fight it. As the GDF began securing the Tyranitar for transport to a recovery center, the three of them stood together on the riverbank. The hostility was gone, replaced by a fragile, hard-won respect. They were still trapped by the law, still bound to a fate they hadn't chosen. But out here, in the dirt and the aftermath of a true battle, they hadn't been a monarch and his prizes. They had been a team. And as they prepared for the journey back to Wyndon, Ash looked at the stoic warrior and the resilient star beside him and felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt since the announcement. It wasn't happiness, and it wasn't acceptance. It was hope. Chapter 4, The Herald of Nothing. The victory in the wild area was short-lived, a brief, adrenaline-fueled reprieve before reality crashed back down. Returning to Wyndon meant returning to the gilded cage, to the news reports, to the suffocating weight of the guardian claws. The fragile camaraderie forged in the heat of battle quickly evaporated under the cold, political lights of the city. Bee retreated back into her disciplined silence. Nessa was immediately swallowed by a sea of AIDS and damage control meetings, and Ash was once again a king confined to his castle in Rose Tower. He spent the next 2 days in a frustrating limbo. He trained with his Pokémon in the tower's state-of-the-art battle court, the familiar rhythm of combat a welcome anchor in a world that had become unmoored. He tried to research the Guardian Claws on his own, but the texts Sonia had left were dense and esoteric, and without her expert guidance, it was like trying to read a map in a language he didn't know. He was restless, a coiled spring of energy with no release. He had faced down a monster, and his reward was to be benched, to sit and wait while men like Tarleton pulled the strings. The taste of it was bitter. It was late on the second night when his Rotom phone chimed, pulling him from a half-hearted sparring match between Pikachu and Lucario. It was Sonia. Her face appeared on the screen, looking tired but energized, the way she always did when she was on the verge of a breakthrough. She was bundled in a heavy parka, and the background behind her was a swirl of wind-driven snow. Ash, I found something, she said, her voice slightly tinny from the wind. You need to get to the Crown Tundra. Now. Ash's listlessness vanished. The Crown Tundra? What's there? The source, I think, she replied, pulling her hood tighter. The energy signatures from the Tyranitar and the Rhydon, they weren't random. I cross-referenced their movements with geological ley lines and historical records. They were being drawn north, toward a single, powerful nexus point. All the data points here. She gestured to the blizzard behind her. I found a ruin, one that's not on any modern map. It's old, Ash. Pre-Galar monarchy old. The energy readings are off the charts, but it's the same absence signature. The Unraveler's influence is strong here. I think this is where we find out what we're really fighting. I'm on my way, he said without hesitation. But Tarleton has me on lockdown. Getting a transport won't be easy. Leave that to me, Sonia said, a cunning glint in her eye. As the head of regional research, I'm requisitioning the monarch's assistance for a time-sensitive, high-security archaeological survey. It's all perfectly official. Tarleton can't block it without looking like he's impeding Gaylor's scientific progress. There's a League transport cleared for takeoff at the Winden airfield in 1 hour. Be on it. She ended the call, leaving Ash with a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just escaping his cage, he was running toward the heart of the problem. He packed a bag with cold-weather gear, recalled his Pokémon, and, for the first time, used his monarch status not as a burden, but as a key. A quick, authoritative call to the tower's security chief, citing Professor Sonia's official request, and all doors were opened. No one questioned him. The deference was still unsettling, but for now, it was useful. The flight to the Crown Tundra was a study in contrasts. He left the glittering, modern metropolis of Winden and flew into a land of stark, ancient beauty. The tundra was a vast expanse of white, a primordial landscape of snow-swept plains and jagged, ice-encrusted mountains that clawed at the slate-gray sky. It was a place that felt untouched by time, a fitting location for a secret older than Gaylor itself. Sonia was waiting for him at the small, windswept airfield, her yamper bundled in a tiny coat at her feet. She led him to a rugged, all-terrain vehicle, and they set off into the blizzard. The ruins are in a valley on the far side of the snowslide slope, she shouted over the roar of the engine and the wind. The locals have legends about it. They call it the Silent Vale. They say nothing grows there, and that Pokémon avoid it because the air makes them forgetful. They say the veil between worlds is thin there. Sounds cheerful, Ash commented, pulling his own parka tighter. It gets better, Sonia continued, her eyes alight with academic fervor. The carvings I found on the outer stones aren't Galaran. They're older. They depict stories not of kings and knights, but of cosmic entities. There's one recurring motif, a figure, more like a hole in space than a person, devouring stars. The inscription beneath it, loosely translated, reads, "Beware the great silence." It is the end of song, the end of thought, the end of light. It follows the loudest sound. The loudest sound, Ash murmured, the pieces clicking into place. The energy from my battle with Leon. Exactly, Sonia confirmed. We didn't just wake something up, Ash. We rang a dinner bell for a predator that feeds on existence itself. They reached the valley as the meager daylight began to fail. Sonia was right. The place was unervingly silent. The wind that howled on the slopes above seemed to die at the valley's edge, leaving a profound, dead stillness. The snow here was thin, revealing frozen, black earth that seemed to drink the light. In the center of the valley stood the ruin, a circle of monolithic black stones, their surfaces covered in spiraling, alien-looking glyphs. It wasn't a temple, it felt more like a cage, or a warning sign. As they stepped out of the vehicle, Ash felt it. A strange, subtle pressure in his mind. A feeling of emptiness. It was like trying to remember a word that was just on the tip of your tongue, a constant, low-level hum of psychic static. Pikachu, on his shoulder, pressed closer, his ears flat against his head. You feel it, don't you? Sonia asked, her own face tight with concentration. A cognitive dampening field. It's trying to fuzz our thoughts, make us confused, make us want to turn back. It's not working, Ash said, his focus sharpening in resistance to the pressure. He scanned the ruins, his battle-honed senses on high alert. Something was wrong. The silence was too perfect. They moved toward the central ring of stones, their boots crunching on the frozen ground. The carvings were even more disturbing up close. They depicted scenes of cosmic horror, worlds cracking open, Pokemon dissolving into streams of light, and always, the central figure of the Star Eater, the Unraveler. This wasn't a place of worship, Ash said, running a gloved hand over a carving of a dissolving Dialga. This was a prison. Or a containment site. And whatever it was meant to contain is getting out, Sonia agreed, her Rotom phone whirring as it scanned the glyphs. These carvings are a warning. They speak of heralds, mortals who are overwhelmed by the Unraveler's influence. They lose themselves, their minds hollowed out and filled with the Song of Silence. They become its agents in the physical world. As she spoke those words, a figure stepped out from behind one of the monolithic stones. He was a tall, lean man dressed in the thick furs of a tundra native, a long, white scarf obscuring the lower half of his face. His eyes, visible above the scarf, were a piercing, unnatural shade of violet. They were utterly devoid of emotion, like polished amethyst stones. He carried a single, ornate pokeball crafted from pale, carved wood. The pressure in Ash's mind intensified tenfold. "You have come," the man's voice was a monotone, a whisper that carried with unnatural clarity in the dead air. It was a voice with no inflection, no warmth, no soul. "You carry the loud sound within you. A feast for the coming silence." Sonia gasped, taking a step back. Melanie's top student. Bryson. He was one of the most respected Ice-type trainers in the tundra. He went missing a month ago. "Bryson is gone," the herald said, his violet eyes fixed on Ash. "He was a song that has ended. I am merely the echo that remains. I am the voice of the inevitable. The whisper of the void." Ash moved to stand in front of Sonia, shielding her. "Let her go," he said, his voice low and steady. "Your business is with me." "All business is with the silence," the herald replied calmly. "All things will be business for the silence. But you are special. You are a beacon. Extinguishing you will be a glorious symphony of nothing." He tossed his pokeball into the air. It opened not with a flash of red light, but with a ripple of distorted space. The Pokemon that emerged was a Frostless, but it was horrifyingly wrong. Its kimono-like body was frayed and translucent at the edges, as if it were slowly being erased. Its eyes glowed with the same vacant violet light as its master's. The air temperature plummeted, and frost spread rapidly across the black ground from the Frostless's position. "You can't fight it," the herald whispered. "Its existence is a paradox. It is here and not here. Your attacks will find only emptiness. We'll see about that." Ash countered, his mind already working, adapting. He knew a straightforward attack was pointless after what he'd seen in the wild area. "Lucario, let's go." Lucario appeared, his aura already flaring in response to the oppressive psychic pressure. He locked eyes with the corrupted Frostless, sensing the wrongness of it. "Aura Sphere." Ash commanded. Lucario launched a perfect, pulsating sphere of blue energy. Just as the herald predicted, as it neared the Frostless, the ghost-like Pokemon seemed to flicker, and the aura sphere passed straight through it, striking one of the monolithic stones behind it with a loud crack. "I told you," the herald's voice was devoid of triumph, a simple statement of fact. "It is a ghost of a ghost. How can you strike what is already an echo?" Sonia, watching from behind Ash, had her Rotom phone out. "Ash, its energy state is fluctuating. It's phasing between dimensions. That's how it's avoiding the attacks." "Then we don't attack where it is," Ash murmured, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "We attack where it's going to be." He closed his eyes, extending his own aura, feeling for Lucario's, for the cold void that was the Frostless. It was like trying to grab smoke. But there was a rhythm to its phasing, a pattern. "Lucario, Meteor Mash." Ash yelled, opening his eyes. "Don't aim for Frostless. Aim for the space 3 feet to its left." It was an insane command. Lucario didn't question it. Trusting his trainer completely, he charged, his fist glowing with metallic energy, and swung at empty air. The herald almost seemed to show a flicker of amusement. But as Lucario's fist passed through the designated spot, the frostless flickered back into existence, directly in the path of the attack. It had been a predictive strike, a perfect interception of its dimensional phasing. The meteor mash connected with devastating force, sending the frostless flying. The violet light around it sputtered. Impossible, the herald breathed, his monotone breaking for the first time. No one should be able to perceive the echoes. I'm not perceiving it. I'm feeling it. Ash shot back. And we're just getting started. Surfetched, stand by for battle. He threw another pokeball, and his gallant, leek-wielding knight appeared, shield at the ready. The frostless recovered, its movements now more erratic. It opened its mouth and unleashed a torrent of frigid air. Blizzard, the herald commanded. The temperature dropped to unbearable levels. A blinding storm of ice and snow erupted from the frostless, consuming the battlefield. Visibility dropped to 0. It's using the storm to hide its phasing. Sonia shouted, trying to shield her face from the razor-sharp ice crystals. It doesn't matter. Ash's voice cut through the gale. He was a beacon of calm certainty in the chaos. Lucario, use your aura to guide him. Surfetched, meteor assault. Straight ahead. Surfetched lowered its leak lance, which began to glow with an incredible, focused light. This was its ultimate attack, an all-or-nothing charge. It was suicidal to use it in a blind blizzard. But Surfetched had a guide. A faint blue glow emanated from Lucario, who stood beside Ash, his eyes closed, acting as a living radar, tracking the frostless's movements through the storm via its chaotic energy signature. He sent a pulse of aura toward Surfetched, a single, directional command. There. Surfetched charged. A golden comet in the whiteout, it shot through the blizzard, unerringly following the path Lucario had laid out. There was a sickening crunch, a shriek that was half Pokémon cry, half static, and then silence. The blizzard died as quickly as it had formed. The frostless lay in a heap on the ground, the meteor assault having shattered its form and broken its connection to the unraveler. It flickered once, then dissolved into a fine, gray dust that was swept away by the wind. The herald stood motionless, staring at the spot where his Pokémon had been. He showed no sadness, no anger. Only a quiet, chilling curiosity. You have undone the echo, he whispered. He looked at Ash, his violet eyes seeming to see straight through him. The song of silence will be displeased. But it will also be, interested. Before Ash could react, the herald raised a hand. The ground around him began to distort, the black earth turning to a viscous, non-Euclidean fluid. You cannot win, Loud One. To destroy the heralds is to feed the master. All energy you expend is a gift to the void. Ash realized with a jolt of horror that the herald wasn't fighting him anymore. He was the bait. The energy from their battle, the aura spheres, the meteor assault, the very life force of his Pokémon, was being drawn into the ground, siphoned by the unraveler. Sonia, get back. Ash yelled, realizing the trap. He had to end this, but how? Defeating him would only release more energy. Capturing him seemed impossible. He had to make a choice. A hard one. Lucario, Bone Rush. Surfetched, Brutal Swing. Don't attack him. Break the stones. It was a massive gamble. The stones were the source of the dampening field, but they might also be what was focusing the Unraveler's power here. It could make things better, or it could make things catastrophically worse. Lucario and Surfetched, following their trainer's desperate command, turned their attention from the herald and unleashed their fury on the ancient monoliths. Bone staves and leek swords slammed into the black rock. The herald watched, his head cocked to the side, a silent observer to this new, strange tactic. The first stone cracked. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and the psychic pressure in the valley lessened slightly. The second stone shattered. The whine grew louder, and a wave of pure, raw energy, the energy the Unraveler had been siphoning, was released back into the air. The herald staggered back, a look of what might have been pain on his face. "You are disrupting the harvest," he hissed, his voice losing its monotone, a flicker of something like anger finally showing through. "That's the idea," Ash yelled. "Keep going." As the third stone fell, the ground beneath the herald became unstable. The trap was breaking. He was losing his connection to the site. He looked at Ash, a final, cold promise in his violet eyes. "This changes nothing. The silence is patient. It will find other conduits. It will find other wells. And it will find you." With a final ripple of distorted space, the herald of nothing sank into the ground and vanished, leaving only the oppressive silence and the broken stones behind. Ash stood, breathing heavily, the cold air burning his lungs. He had won the battle, but the herald's final words echoed in his mind. To destroy the heralds is to feed the master. He had driven him off, but he had also released a massive amount of energy, effectively feeding the very entity they were trying to starve. It was a no-win scenario. Sonia ran to his side, her face pale. "Ash, what you did, it was incredibly risky. You could have caused a full-scale reality breach." "I didn't have a choice," Ash said, recalling his exhausted Pokémon. "Beating him was making it stronger. I had to break the connection." He looked around at the ruined prison. "At least we know what we're up against now. Not just corrupted Pokémon. It has agents. Smart ones." As they stood in the ruins, Ash's Rotom phone buzzed again. He expected it to be Nessa or B, but the face that appeared was Leon's. The former champion looked haggard, his usual charismatic smile absent. "Ash," Leon said, his voice urgent. "I need to talk to you. I've been looking into something since the championship. Something about our new chairman." "Tarleton?" Ash asked. "And some of the old, noble families of Galar," Leon continued. "The ones who supported him, who pushed for the revival of the Guardian Claws. Families like Lord Harrington's." The name hung in the air. Ash had heard it before. "These families," Leon said, his voice dropping low, "they have secrets. Old ones. They aren't just traditionalists, Ash. There are rumors, old stories. They don't see the ancient ways as history. They see it as a source of power. Some of them, they don't just believe in the old legends. They worship them." A chilling thought connected in Ash's mind. The Herald, the Unraveler, Lord Harrington, Chairman Tarleton. Were they separate threats, or were they all tangled together in a conspiracy far older and more dangerous than he could have ever imagined? He looked at Sonia, who had overheard the call, her face a mask of dawning horror. They had come to the Crown Tundra to find the source of the enemy. They had found him. But they had also uncovered the horrifying possibility that there was another enemy, a human one, hiding in plain sight back in Wyndham, pulling the strings and perhaps, even welcoming the coming silence. Chapter 5, The Tide of Holbury. The icy dread of the Crown Tundra followed them back to Wyndham, a chilling counterpoint to the city's oblivious warmth. The conversation with Leon had planted a seed of paranoia in Ash's mind. He now saw shadows in every corner of Rose Tower, potential motives behind every polite nod from a League official. Lord Harrington, a name he barely knew a week ago, now loomed large, a charismatic, smiling face on the news, publicly praising the brave new Guardian Council, while potentially consorting with the forces of nothingness. It was a war on two fronts, one against a cosmic horror, the other against a political conspiracy hiding in plain sight. Sonia had thrown herself back into her research with a renewed, almost feverish intensity, trying to find a link between the Unraveler cult and Galar's ancient noble families. B had been recalled to the GDF headquarters for extensive debriefings on their encounter with the Herald, her martial discipline now aimed at a faceless, formless enemy. They were all fighting their own battles, separated by duty and the invisible walls of their gilded cage. Ash felt the most useless of all. He was the monarch, the linchpin of the entire situation, yet he was relegated to waiting. Waiting for Sonia to find a clue, waiting for B to form a strategy, waiting for Harrington to make a mistake. He was a weapon with no target, and the inaction was more grating than any battle. The attack, when it came, was not on him. It was on Nessa. He was watching a news broadcast, a vapid political talk show, when Harrington's face appeared on screen. The nobleman was handsome, silver-haired, and possessed a smile that could charm a starving Arcanine. He spoke with a smooth, practiced sincerity that made the hair on Ash's arms stand up. "The Guardian Council is a return to the strength that made Galar great," Harrington was saying, his voice resonating with patriarchal confidence. "Our new monarch provides the power, while the esteemed ladies of the council provide the wisdom, the grace, and the stability. However, I have concerns. In times of crisis, we need our leaders focused. I fear that gym leader Nessa, a woman of incredible talent, is perhaps distracted. Her duties in Holbury, her commercial enterprises, can she truly devote herself to the immense responsibility of the council while her attention is so divided? Perhaps it is time for her to delegate her local concerns, and fully embrace her new, vital role here in Winden." The message was clear, wrapped in a veneer of feigned concern. It was a political power play, an attempt to isolate Nessa, to strip her of her home base and her independence, to reduce her from a regional power player to a mere fixture in Winden. Harrington was using the crisis they had created to consolidate his own influence. Ash was about to smash the off button in disgust when the broadcast was interrupted, not by an emergency alert, but by a frantic, live feed from a news helicopter. The image was chaotic, showing the coastline of Holbury. But something was terribly wrong. The normally serene blue waters of the bay were a churning, violent vortex of black. A massive, unnatural maelstrom had formed just off the coast, its edges crackling with the now familiar, sickening violet energy. Huge waves, impossibly large for the enclosed bay, were crashing against the city's sea walls, threatening to breach them. The famous Holbury Lighthouse, a symbol of the city, was being battered relentlessly. "This is a direct attack," Ash breathed, his blood running cold. This wasn't a random event. This was targeted. A direct assault on Nessa's home, her identity, and her power base, happening just as Harrington was publicly questioning her ability to lead it. His Rotom phone rang. It was Nessa. Her face was a mask of cold fury, but her voice was steady, the voice of a leader in a crisis. The background behind her was a blur of motion and panicked voices. "I'm on the evening express train to Holbury," she said, her voice tight. "My city is under attack." "I'm coming with you," Ash said immediately. There was no question, no hesitation. "I don't need a bodyguard, Ash," she snapped, the stress evident in her tone. "You're not getting one," he retorted, already grabbing his gear. "You're getting a partner. You saw what these things can do. You can't fight it with PR statements and damage control. You need firepower. I'm bringing it." There was a pause. He could see the internal conflict on her face, her fierce independence warring with the pragmatic reality of the situation. "The East Platform. The train leaves in 10 minutes, she said, and hung up. It was all the confirmation he needed. He left a quick message for Sonia and B, telling them where he was going, and ran. He made it to the station with a minute to spare, vaulting over a turnstile and sprinting down the platform just as the train's doors were about to close. He slipped inside, the doors hissing shut behind him. He found Nessa in a private car, her entire PR and legal team conspicuously absent. She was alone, staring out the window at the city lights blurring past, her tablet displaying a dozen different live feeds of the chaos in her city. She didn't look up as he approached and sat opposite her. "Harrington timed this perfectly," she said, her voice bitter. "He makes me look incompetent on national television, and then my city descends into chaos. He's either the luckiest man in Galar, or he's behind this." "He's behind it," Ash said with certainty. The Unraveler is the weapon, but he's the one aiming it. Nessa finally looked at him, her cool blue eyes filled with a storm of their own. They're not just attacking the city. They're attacking my Pokémon. The gym's water tanks, the Pokémon in the bay, they're becoming corrupted. Aggressive. My own Dreadnought, my trainers had to fight to contain him. He didn't recognize them. The pain in her voice was raw and real. It wasn't about her brand anymore. It was about her family. Her Pokémon. Her home. We'll fix it, Ash said, his voice quiet but absolute. We'll save your city, and we'll make Harrington pay for it. She looked at him, a long, searching gaze. She saw no pity in his eyes, only a shared, resolute anger. He wasn't here to save her. He was here to fight alongside her. She gave a single, sharp nod. The alliance, once a matter of cold pragmatism, was starting to feel like something genuine. By the time the train pulled into Holbury, the situation had deteriorated. The sun had set, and the only light came from the emergency strobes of rescue vehicles, the frantic beams of searchlights, and the terrifying, pulsating violet glow of the maelstrom in the bay. The air was heavy with the smell of salt and ozone, and the roar of the unnatural tide was a constant, thunderous presence. The city's emergency command center had been set up in the gym. It was organized chaos. Gym trainers, city officials, and GDF liaisons moved with purpose, their faces grim. Nessa stepped into the room, and a wave of relief washed over the occupants. Their leader was here. She was instantly in command, her voice cutting through the noise, issuing a rapid-fire series of orders. What's the status of the seawall? Get me tide projections for the next hour. Where are the primary breach points? I want every trainer with a rock or ground-type Pokémon reinforcing those positions now. She was magnificent. All the cool calculation and media savvy she usually directed at her brand was now focused with laser precision on saving her city. Ash stood back, letting her lead, his respect for her growing by the second. A young gym trainer, his face pale with fear, ran up to her. Leader Nessa. It's the lighthouse. The main generator failed. The storm's getting worse, and without the light, the evacuation boats can't navigate the harbor entrance. They're trapped out there. Nessa's face hardened. How many boats? 3, ma'am. With about 50 people and their Pokémon. Nessa turned, her eyes finding Ash. The unspoken question hung in the air. This was beyond reinforcing walls. This was a rescue mission, in the heart of the storm. I'll get the light back on, Ash said. You keep this city from washing away. It's too dangerous, she protested, her leader's facade cracking to reveal genuine concern. The maelstrom is strongest around the lighthouse island. I do my best work when it's dangerous, he said with a small, confident grin. He turned to go, then paused. Nessa. Your Dreadnought. Where is he? Contained in the lower levels, she said, her voice pained. He's not himself. Let me take him, Ash said. She stared at him, shocked. He's corrupted. He's a danger to everyone. He's your partner, Ash countered gently. He's a symbol of this city. And right now, the people out there need to see their symbols fighting back. Let me bring him home. She wrestled with the decision for a long moment, then nodded, her trust in him overriding her fear. Go. The journey to the lighthouse was a brutal, chaotic fight. Ash rode on the back of his Dragonite, flying low over the churning, black waves. Below, corrupted water-type Pokémon, Sharpedo with glowing violet eyes, Tentacruel with tentacles that warped the space around them, leaped from the waves, trying to drag them down. On Dragonite's other side flew Dreadnought. The moment it had been released, its corrupted mind had driven it to attack, its jaws snapping wildly. But Ash hadn't fought back. Instead, he'd sent out Pikachu. The small electric mouse had simply stood his ground, weathering the initial, frenzied assault, and then placed a paw on the giant turtle's snout, releasing a gentle, steady stream of low-voltage electricity. It wasn't an attack, it was therapy. A constant, rhythmic pulse to disrupt the Unraveler's influence. It had calmed the beast, not healed it, but brought it back from the brink. Now, it flew beside them, still wreathed in a faint violet aura, but its eyes held a glimmer of its old self, its rage focused not on Ash, but on the maelstrom that had poisoned its home. They reached the small, rocky island of the lighthouse just as a colossal wave crashed against it, sending spray hundreds of feet into the air. The base of the lighthouse was already flooding. "Dragonite, get to the top, see if you can find the external power conduit," Ash yelled. "Dreadnought, with me." He leaped from Dragonite's back, landing on the slippery rocks as Dreadnought crashed into the water beside him. He ran for the lighthouse door, but his path was blocked. Rising from the churning sea was a creature of pure nightmare. It had the basic shape of a Wylord, but it was a twisted, corrupted mockery. Its skin was the color of a deep-sea bruise, covered in pulsating violet lines. Its eyes were gaping, empty holes of purple light, and its mouth was a maw of jagged, crystalline teeth. It was an echo, a full manifestation of the Unraveler's power, and it was colossal, dwarfing the lighthouse itself. It let out a mournful, distorted cry that sounded like tearing metal, and the maelstrom intensified around it. "So that's the source," Ash muttered, grabbing a pokeball. "Lucario, let's go." The battle began. Lucario's aura spheres and steel beams were like pebbles against a mountain. They struck the echo and were simply absorbed, its mass of corrupted energy feeding on the attacks. "It's no good," Ash realized. "It's just eating the energy." High above, Dragonite located the external conduit, but it was shattered, torn apart by the storm. He couldn't fix it. The echo opened its monstrous maw and unleashed a torrent of black, viscous water, not a water gun, but a concentrated blast of the maelstrom itself. It struck the lighthouse, and the ancient stone structure groaned, a huge crack appearing in its side. The evacuation boats were still trapped, unable to navigate without the light. They were running out of time. Ash looked at the echo, then at Dreadnought, who was battling valiantly in the water, trying to protect the base of the lighthouse. He saw the faint violet aura still clinging to the Pokémon. The poison was still inside him. And then, the insane, chaotic, Ash Ketchum logic of his plan clicked into place. He couldn't fight the echo from the outside. He couldn't overpower it. But maybe he could poison it from the inside. "Lucario, get back." Ash recalled his partner. He looked at Dreadnought, at the glint of the true Pokémon still struggling within the corrupted shell. He focused, projecting his thoughts, his intent. "Trust me, Dreadnought. We finish this together. For Nessa. For Hulbury." Dreadnought seemed to understand. It met Ash's gaze and let out a defiant roar. "Dreadnought, use jaw lock." "On me." Ash yelled, pointing to his own arm. For a terrifying second, Dreadnought hesitated. Then, it charged. It clamped its massive, powerful jaws around Ash's forearm. The pain was immense, a crushing, blinding agony, but Ash gritted his teeth and didn't cry out. He felt the Unraveler's energy, the violet poison, course from Dreadnought's teeth, trying to infect him. But it met something stronger. The residual, monumental power of the monarch, the loud sound the herald had spoken of. The two energies clashed within him, a war of creation and uncreation. "Now!" Ash screamed, his voice raw with pain and effort. "Pikachu, aim for Dreadnought. Thunderbolt. Full power." Pikachu, seeing his trainer's desperate gambit, didn't hesitate. He unleashed a massive bolt of lightning. It struck Dreadnought, coursed through its body, and into Ash, who acted as a living, screaming ground wire. The combined energies, Pikachu's lightning, the Unraveler's corruption, and Ash's own monarchal aura, reached a critical point. "Throw me!" Ash roared at Dreadnought. With a heave of its powerful neck, Dreadnought unhinged its jaw and flung Ash through the air, directly at the gaping maw of the Wylord Echo. Ash, a human cannonball of volatile, conflicting energies, flew into the darkness. Inside the Echo was not flesh, but a roaring vortex of anti-energy. He was being torn apart, his very essence unraveled. But that was the plan. He held out his arm, and the unstable, volatile power within him detonated. It wasn't an explosion of force. It was an explosion of principles. Light against dark. Creation against nothingness. The pure, life-affirming energy of a boy and his Pokémon against the cold, dead hunger of the void. From the outside, the Wylord Echo convulsed. The violet light flickered violently. A brilliant, golden light erupted from within it, shining through its spectral skin. The creature shrieked, a sound of pure agony, and then it imploded, collapsing in on itself and dissolving into a shower of harmless grey dust, just like the Frostless. The maelstrom died instantly. The churning black water calmed, returning to its normal, serene blue. Ash fell from the sky, unconscious, and plunged into the now peaceful bay. He was pulled from the water by a powerful set of jaws. Dreadnought, its eyes clear and its body free of the violet taint, gently nudged him onto the rocks. The crisis was over. But the lighthouse was still dark. Pikachu, seeing his trainer unconscious, knew what he had to do. He scrambled up the side of the lighthouse, all the way to the top. He stood where the light should be, a tiny, defiant figure against the dawn that was now breaking. And he began to glow. He poured all of his remaining energy, all of his love for his fallen trainer, into a single, continuous, brilliant flash of light. It wasn't a thunderbolt. It wasn't an attack. It was a beacon. Out in the harbor, the trapped boats saw it. A steady, brilliant, golden light, pulsing from the top of the lighthouse. A path home. When Ash awoke, it was to the smell of antiseptic and the soft beeping of a heart monitor. He was in a private room in the Holbury Hospital, his arm heavily bandaged. The first thing he saw was Nessa, sitting in a chair by his bed. Her makeup was gone, her hair was a mess, and her eyes were red-rimmed, but to Ash, she had never looked more beautiful. She saw he was awake, and a wave of relief so profound it was almost painful washed over her face. "You're an idiot," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "A reckless, insane, wonderful idiot." "Did it work?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Are the boats safe?" "They're safe," she confirmed, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "The city is safe. All thanks to you." She reached out and took his good hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "When I saw you, when you told Dreadnought to throw you into that thing, I thought I'd lost you." The admission hung in the air between them. The wall of professionalism, of brand management and political calculation, was gone. All that was left was the raw, terrifying, and undeniable truth of her feelings. "You saved my home, Ash," she whispered. "You saved my partner. You saved me." He squeezed her hand. "That's what partners do." They sat in a comfortable silence for a long time, watching the morning sun stream through the window, glinting off the now peaceful waters of the bay. The battle for Holbury was won. But in its aftermath, something new had been forged. The political alliance, the reluctant partnership, had finally, irrevocably, become personal. For the first time, Ash wasn't just a chaotic variable in Nessa's carefully managed life. He was a part of it. And as he looked at her, at the genuine, unguarded warmth in her eyes, he realized with a jolt that he wouldn't have it any other way. Chapter 6, The Slumbering Sword and Shield. The news of the victory at Holbury spread like wildfire. To the public, it was a heroic tale, the new monarch, Ash Ketchum, working alongside the valiant gym leader Nessa to save her city from a mysterious natural disaster. The media, guided by Nessa's now fiercely loyal PR team, spun it as the first great act of the Guardian Council, a testament to their strength and unity. Lord Harrington was forced to make a public statement congratulating them, his charming smile looking strained, his words tasting like ash. For a brief moment, they had won the political game. But in the quiet, secure rooms of Rose Tower, the victory felt hollow. Ash's arm was healing, but the memory of the Unraveler's touch lingered, a phantom coldness. The attack on Holbury had been a terrifying escalation. The enemy was no longer just targeting remote areas, it was striking at the heart of Gaylor's infrastructure and its leadership. Sonia's research had hit a wall. While she had found tenuous links between Harrington's lineage and a pre-Gaylor death cult that worshipped a silent god, she had no concrete proof. It was all myth and hearsay, inadmissible in any council and certainly not enough to challenge a man as powerful and well-regarded as Harrington. They were in a cold war, and they were losing. The four of them, Ash, Sonia, Nessa, and B, were gathered in the Tower Library, the site of their third, and perhaps most important, confrontation. This time, there was no anger or negotiation. There was only a grim sense of shared purpose. The events of the past weeks had stripped away their animosity, forging them into a reluctant, but effective, command team. Neutralizing the echoes and heralds isn't enough, Sonia said, pacing before a holographic map of Gaylor dotted with red warning icons. Ash was right. Every battle we win, we expend energy, and the Unraveler feeds on it. It's a war of attrition we cannot win. We're not just fighting an army, we're feeding it. We need a way to fight the Unraveler itself, not just its symptoms. Conventional weapons are useless, B stated, her arms crossed. She had analyzed every scrap of data from the battles. Its ability to warp space and feed on energy makes a direct assault impossible for any known Pokémon, even legendaries. So we need an unconventional weapon, Nessa mused, looking up from her tablet where she was tracking Harrington's political movements. Something that operates outside the normal rules of engagement. Ash looked at the display cases lining the library walls, at the artifacts of Gaylor's long history. His eyes fell on a tapestry depicting two heroic wolves, one carrying a sword, the other a shield, standing against a swirling vortex of black clouds, the darkest day. Zacian and Zamazenta, he said, his voice quiet but firm. The three women turned to look at him. The legends say they defeated Eternatus, Ash continued, walking towards the tapestry. They didn't just overpower it. They absorbed the out-of-control Gaylor particles. They didn't destroy the energy, they contained it. They are the perfect countermeasure. Sonia's eyes lit up. He's right. Their abilities. Zacian's sword can cut through anything, even intangible things like Dynamax energy. Zamazenta's shield is said to be impenetrable, able to withstand any attack. They aren't just strong, they operate on a conceptual level. They could, theoretically, sever the Unraveler's connection to our dimension and defend against its power. There's a problem, B interjected, her pragmatic nature surfacing. The rusted sword and shield are in the vault below the stadium. They're inert pieces of metal. The heroes themselves haven't been seen since the last crisis. We have no way of calling them. The legends say the artifacts are the key, Sonia insisted, pulling up ancient texts on the holographic display. They are the catalyst. They awaken when Gaylor is in its greatest peril, and only in the hands of heroes who have confronted their deepest truths. She paused, looking around the room at the three people with her. I think that's us. It was a bold, almost arrogant statement, but no one argued. They had each been tested, pushed to their limits and beyond. The slumbering wield, Ash said, his gaze distant. That's where we found them last time. That's where their power resides. A plan formed, desperate and steeped in mythology. They would travel to the heart of the ancient forest, to the fog-shrouded shrine where the rusted artifacts lay. They would attempt the ritual described in Sonia's texts, a trial of spirit, not of strength, to prove their worthiness and reawaken the sleeping heroes. Their journey to the Weald was made in secret. They slipped out of Winden under the cover of a manufactured GDF training exercise arranged by B. They knew Harrington's eyes were everywhere, and they couldn't risk him learning of their plan. If he knew they were trying to acquire the power of the legendary heroes, he would surely try to stop them. The slumbering weald was just as Ash remembered it, ethereal, silent, and unervingly beautiful. The air was thick with a shimmering, dreamlike fog, and the ancient trees seemed to hum with a latent power. But this time, something felt different. The familiar, drowsy energy of the forest was tainted. The fog was thicker, colder, and Ash could feel the same subtle, psychic pressure he had felt in the silent vale, a whisper of the Unraveler's influence seeping into this sacred place. They reached the hidden clearing, the circular stone altar where the rusted sword and shield rested. They looked like forgotten junk, two pieces of corroded metal half buried in the moss. The texts say we must each place a hand on the artifacts, Sonia instructed, her voice a nervous whisper. And we must open ourselves to the forest. It will judge us. It will show us our truth. One by one, they stepped forward. Ever the warrior, went first, her expression resolute. Nessa followed, her usual composure replaced by a quiet vulnerability. Sonia, the woman of science, took a deep breath and embraced the mystical. Finally, Ash joined them, placing his hand on the hilt of the rusted sword. The moment his fingers touched the cold metal, the world dissolved. The fog thickened, swirling around them, isolating each of them in a milky white void. The forest, the altar, the others, they were all gone. Ash was alone, floating in a sea of nothing. And then, the trial began. Bee found herself not in fog, but back in the dojo of her youth. She was a child again, facing her stern, unyielding father. He was not abusive, but his standards were impossibly high. She watched as her younger self failed a kata, her form imperfect by a fraction of an inch. Not good enough, Bee, her father's voice echoed, cold and disappointed. Perfection is the only acceptable standard. Anything less is failure. You are weak. The scene shifted. She was at her first tournament, losing a crucial match. Her opponent's hand was raised in victory. The crowd was silent. The shame was a physical weight. You are weak, the voice hissed. The scenes came faster. A GDF training exercise where her strategy failed. A sparring match where she was outmaneuvered. Her battle against Ash in the penthouse, her grapplock falling. Every failure, every moment of weakness, every crack in her armor of discipline was played back for her, amplified and twisted. You cannot be a shield for others, for you are already broken, the illusion of her father said, his face a mask of contempt. You pretend to be strong, but you are terrified of losing. You hide behind your discipline because you are afraid to ask for help. A true warrior stands alone. The illusionary dojo began to crack, to dissolve into the Unraveler's violet static. This wasn't just the forest's trial, the Unraveler was tainting it, turning it into a weapon to break her spirit. Bee gritted her teeth, sweat beading on her brow. The psychic assault was immense. The shame, the fear of failure, it was all real. But then, she remembered the wild area. Ash's chaotic strategy succeeding where her discipline had failed. Nessa's quick thinking saving the river. Sonia's intellect guiding them. She remembered holding her ground, not alone, but as part of a unit. No, she said, her voice shaking but firm. She faced the illusion of her father. A true warrior knows their own limits. A true warrior knows that strength is not about standing alone. It is about trusting the strength of others to cover your weaknesses. Her hand clenched into a fist. My discipline is not a shield for my fear. It is the foundation upon which I build my trust in my allies. Asking for help is not weakness. It is the ultimate expression of strength. As she spoke the words, a golden light erupted from her, shattering the illusion. The violet static receded, and the image of her father dissolved. She was back in the fog, her heart pounding, but her spirit clear and stronger than ever. Nessa's trial was a cruel mockery of her life. She stood on a runway, but the cheering crowd was gone. In its place were jeering, hateful faces, their voices a cacophony of insults. "Fake," one shouted. "You're nothing without the cameras. Your beauty is a lie. Your power is a brand," another screamed. She was in her gym, but her Pokémon wouldn't obey her. They turned their backs on her, their expressions disdainful. The water in the pools turned to mud. The image of Lord Harrington appeared, laughing. "See? You're just a pretty face. You have no real power here." The vision shifted to Holbury. The city was in ruins, washed away. Her people were pointing at her, their faces accusing. "You abandoned us. You were in Winden, playing politics, while our homes were destroyed. You failed us." The Unraveler's influence was insidious, twisting her greatest fear, the loss of her people's love and respect, into a venomous weapon. The jeers, the accusations, the vision of her failure, it all pressed in on her, threatening to suffocate her. Her composure, the bedrock of her identity, began to crumble. She believed it. She was a fraud. She had failed them. But then, a new image pierced the nightmare. Ash, his arm wrapped in Dreadnaught's jaws, screaming to be thrown into the heart of the monster. The raw, selfless courage of it. The absolute, insane faith he had placed in her partner, in her. He hadn't done it for the cameras or the glory. He had done it because it was the right thing to do. He had done it for her. "My worth is not your perception of me," Nessa whispered, her voice trembling but finding its strength. She faced the hateful, illusory crowd. "My worth is not in my brand, or my face, or your approval. It is in my actions. It is in my love for my city. It is in my willingness to fight for it, even if I fail." She stood up straighter, the supermodel's poise returning, but now it came from a place of inner conviction, not practiced perfection. "You can take my fame. You can take my fortune. But you will never take my home. My strength is not what you see. It is what I do." A wave of brilliant blue light washed over her, and the nightmare dissolved. She was alone in the fog, shaken but whole, her sense of self no longer tied to the fickle adoration of the crowd, but forged in the unshakable bedrock of her own heart. Sonia found herself in her grandmother's laboratory. Professor Magnolia stood before her, her expression not kind, but filled with a deep, academic disappointment. "Another fantasy, Sonia?" Magnolia asked, her voice cutting. "Chasing myths and legends while real, quantifiable research needs to be done. The Unraveler. The Guardian Clause being a spell. It's nonsense. You're letting your imagination run away with you, just like you always did." The lab shifted, becoming a university lecture hall. Sonia was at a podium, but her notes were blank. A board of stern-faced professors stared at her, their expressions judgmental. The ghost of Chairman Rose was among them. "Your theories are baseless," Rose's voice boomed. "Lacking in evidence. You are a disgrace to your grandmother's legacy. You will never be the professor she was." The fear of inadequacy, the shadow she had lived in her entire life, became a suffocating weight. Was she just a failure? Was this all a grand delusion? The Unraveler's corruption latched onto her scientific doubt, twisting it. "There is no data. There is no proof. There is only nothing. Your search for answers is meaningless." She looked down at her hands, expecting to see them fade into the violet static. But instead, she saw them as they were in the library, covered in the dust of ancient books. She remembered the thrill of discovery, the intellectual spark of her late-night session with Ash. He hadn't questioned her. He hadn't demanded proof. He had listened, and he had trusted her. "My grandmother's path is not my path," Sonia said, her voice quiet but clear. She looked up at the illusory board of professors. "Science is not just about quantifiable data. It is about asking questions. It is about having the courage to explore the unknown, to challenge established dogma. My theories may be unproven, but they are not baseless. Her voice grew stronger, filled with the passion of a true scholar. I will follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads me into the realm of myth. My legacy will not be a footnote to my grandmother's. It will be my own. A flash of green light, the color of new growth and discovery, erupted from her. The lab, the professors, the ghost of Rose, it all vanished. She stood in the mist, her mind clear, her purpose defined. She was not just Professor Magnolia's granddaughter. She was Professor Sonia, and her work had just begun. Ash's trial was the cruelest of all. He stood on a barren plain under a blood-red sky. And before him stood everyone he had ever traveled with, everyone he had ever cared about. Misty, Brock, May, Max, Dawn, Iris, Cylon, Serena, Clement, Bonnie, his friends from Alola, Go, Chloe. They weren't accusatory. They were just, distant. Fading. You left us behind, Ash, Serena's voice whispered, filled with a terrible sadness. You're always chasing the next battle, Brock's voice echoed. You never stay. The scene changed. He was back at the Kalos League finals, watching his Greninja fall. He was in Sinnoh, facing Tobias's Darkrai, outmatched and helpless. Every significant loss, every time he had failed to protect someone, every painful goodbye replayed in a devastating montage. Then, a new figure appeared. An alternate version of himself. He was taller, colder, his eyes burning with a ruthless ambition. His Pikachu, perched on his shoulder, had scars and a mean, feral look. This is who you could have been, the Dark Ash said, his voice a mocking sneer. If you weren't so sentimental. If you weren't so soft. You could have won it all, years ago. You could have been unbeatable. You could have saved everyone, if you were just willing to sacrifice a few pawns along the way. Your empathy is your weakness. The Unraveler's influence was at its most potent here, offering him the ultimate temptation, a way to undo all his failures, to achieve his dream without the pain of loss. All he had to do was give in to the ruthless logic of power. Ash looked at his dark reflection, at the empty, victorious eyes. He saw the power, but he also saw the cost. A world without friendship. A victory without joy. He thought of Pikachu, his real Pikachu, and their unbreakable bond forged through 1,000 shared struggles and triumphs. He thought of Bee, Nessa, and Sonia, of the trust they were building, a strength born from vulnerability, not from dominance. You're wrong, Ash said, his voice resonating with an unshakable conviction. My weakness isn't my empathy. It's my greatest strength. It's the source of my power. He looked at the phantoms of his friends, not with regret, but with love. I didn't leave them behind. They are a part of me. Every battle I fight with them. Every victory I win, it's their victory too. He faced his dark self. Winning isn't the point. Being the strongest isn't the point. The journey, the bonds, the struggle, that's the point. I would rather lose every battle with my friends at my side than win a single one alone. A brilliant, rainbow-colored light, the light of a Z-move, the light of his deepest self, exploded from him, vaporizing the dark illusion and the phantoms of his past. The red sky shattered like glass, revealing the gentle mists of the Weald. They all stood before the altar again, blinking, returning to themselves. They were breathless, shaken, but transformed. They had faced their inner demons, tainted by the Unraveler, and they had emerged victorious, their truths affirmed. And the artifacts were glowing. The rusted sword pulsed with a soft cyan light, the rusted shield with a gentle magenta. The corrosion flaked away, revealing the gleaming, powerful relics beneath. As they lifted them from the altar, the fog of the Weald parted. Standing before them, drawn by the reawakened power, was a fifth figure. It was Leon. He wasn't wearing his champion's cape, just the simple, practical clothes of a trainer. He held no illusions, no grand purpose. He had simply come. I heard the forest call, he said, his voice quiet and humbled. He looked at Ash, then at the others. He saw the change in them, the new strength in their eyes. When I lost, I thought my story was over. I spent days feeling sorry for myself. But then I realized my story wasn't about being the unbeatable champion. It was about protecting Gaylor. A duty I failed when Rose went mad. A duty I won't fail again. He gestured to the glowing artifacts. But the legends, they're incomplete. There's a piece Sonia's books wouldn't have. A piece passed down only from one champion to the next. He walked to the altar and placed his hand on the stone. The sword and shield are not enough. They are the weapons. But a weapon needs a will to guide it. The 5 of us, we represent the whole of Gaylor. The monarch, the scholar, the leader, the warrior. He looked at his own hand. And the heart. The former champion, whose love for Gaylor is unquestioned. He looked at them, his eyes clear with purpose. The ritual isn't just about proving yourselves worthy. It's about forging a bond. We must combine our wills, our truths, into one. We must ask the heroes for their aid, not as masters, but as partners. Following his lead, they placed their hands on the altar together. They closed their eyes, and this time, they didn't fall into an illusion. Instead, they felt a connection, a powerful current of shared will flowing between them. Ash's conviction, Bea's discipline, Nessa's resilience, Sonia's curiosity, and Leon's humbled heart, all weaving together into a single, powerful tapestry of intent. They called out, not with their voices, but with their spirits. A unified plea for help. In response, 2 lights shot down from the heavens. They were not Pokemon. They were concepts, ideas of heroism given form. They landed before the altar, and the light solidified. Zacian stood, the reawakened intrepid sword held in its mouth, its form sleek and powerful, its gaze noble and sharp. Zamazenta stood beside it, the dauntless shield affixed to its chest, its posture a monument of unbreachable strength. They were no longer just legends. They were here. And they were ready for battle. Chapter 7, The Coup at Rose Tower. The return to Winden with the legendary heroes at their side felt like a turning point. For the first time since the championship, they had a tangible advantage. Zacian and Zamazenta moved with an unnerving silence, their very presence seeming to warp the air, a constant, potent reminder of the power they now wielded. They smuggled the Pokemon into Rose Tower through a private, subterranean entrance Leon had known about from his time as champion, hiding them in the expansive, reinforced training court of the Monarch's suite. The Unraveler's influence seemed to recoil from them, the psychic static that had become a constant, low-level hum in Ash's mind was gone, replaced by a clean, sharp silence. They had the weapons. Now, they needed a plan. The 5 of them gathered in the suite's main room, which had become their de facto war room. The atmosphere was electric with a nervous, focused energy. Harrington has to be our next target, Nessa said, her voice sharp and decisive. She projected a series of images onto the main screen, financial records, communication logs, political appointments. Since the Hulbury incident, he's been consolidating power at an alarming rate. He's using the Unraveler crisis, as his office has branded it, to push through emergency measures, bypassing normal league oversight. He's placing his own people, members of the so-called Purity Council, in key positions within the GDF and the energy sector. He's building his own private army right under our noses, Bea observed grimly, her eyes scanning the personnel files. These aren't just political appointments. These are military placements. His head of security, a man named Commander Valerius, is ex-Special Forces. And look at this, she pointed to a requisition form. Harrington's family estates have been purchasing huge quantities of Pokemon suppression technology. High-frequency emitters, energy nets, stasis fields, equipment designed not to battle Pokemon, but to capture and control them. A cold chill went through the room. He's not just preparing for a political takeover, Sonia murmured, piecing it together. He knows we're getting closer to the truth. He knows we fought a herald. He knows about the Unraveler. But he doesn't see it as a threat. He sees it as a tool. The old cult legends, Leon added, his face grim. They believed they could tame the silent god, use its power to purify Gaylor and restore it to a forgotten glory. Harrington is trying to do the same thing. He wants to control the Unraveler. And he can't do that with us, or them, in the way, Ash finished, looking toward the training court where the two legendary Pokémon rested. He needs us out of the picture. And he needs the sword and shield. The horrifying reality of their situation snapped into focus. Harrington wasn't just a political rival, he was the high priest of an apocalypse cult, and he was about to make his move. He'll strike soon, Nessa predicted. He has to. We've been too quiet since Holbury. He'll assume we're planning something. He'll use the emergency powers he's granted himself to launch a preemptive strike. He'll stage a coup, B stated flatly. A legal one. He'll declare the Gaylor League incompetent, and us a chaotic liability. He'll invoke some ancient emergency protocol, seize control of the government, and come for us. As if on cue, a klaxon began to blare throughout Rose Tower. Not a fire alarm, but a security alert. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside their suite. Ash's Rotom phone buzzed with an official, system-wide alert from Chairman Tarleton's office. By order of the Gaylor Purity Council, under the authority of the Regional Security Act, Emergency Protocol 7 has been enacted. The Gaylor League leadership is temporarily suspended pending a security review. The Guardian Council is to be taken into protective custody for their own safety. All citizens are to remain calm. This action is for the protection and purification of the Gaylor region. Protective custody, Nessa scoffed, her voice dripping with venom. He's not even trying to be subtle. He doesn't have to be, B said, already strapping on tactical gauntlets. He has the law, and the guns, on his side. Heavy, rhythmic footsteps echoed from the hallway, growing louder. The sound of armored boots on marble. They were here. The five of them exchanged a look. The time for planning was over. Leon, you and B are the front line, Ash said, his voice instantly taking command. The easygoing traveler was gone, replaced by the decisive, battle-hardened monarch. You have the most combat experience. Your job is to secure the legendary Pokémon and get them out of the tower. Use the service tunnels Leon knows. Get them to the stadium. It's the most defensible location in the city. B nodded, a flicker of respect in her eyes. It was the right call. Leon gave a grim smile. A champion time for a final stand. Sonia, Nessa, you're the brains, Ash continued, turning to them. Fighting our way out is a losing battle. We need to cut the head off the snake. You two need to get to the League's central server room. It's on the 50th floor. Sonia, I need proof. Find evidence of Harrington's treason, his connection to the cult, anything that will expose him. Nessa, I need you to get that information to the world. Use your media contacts, hack the emergency broadcast system, I don't care how. Turn public opinion against him. Shatter his legitimacy. Sonia's eyes were wide, but she nodded, her fear overshadowed by a fierce resolve. Nessa's face was a mask of cold fury. Consider it done. What about you? Leon asked. Ash looked toward the main door of the suite, where the sound of a plasma cutter had just begun to whine. I'm the monarch. The one they really want. I'm going to give them a fight they'll never forget. He grinned, a feral, challenging expression. I'm buying you time. The plan was set. They had seconds. B and Leon ran for the training court, pokeballs already in hand. Zacian and Zamazenta rose to their feet, their eyes glowing. Sonia and Nessa slipped out a secondary exit that led to a service stairwell, Sonia's Rotom phone already displaying a schematic of the tower. Ash stood alone in the center of the room, facing the main door. He took a deep breath, and tossed a single pokeball into the air. "Pikachu, you're with me." His partner leaped from his shoulder, landing in front of him, sparks crackling from his cheeks, his expression a perfect mirror of Ash's own defiant determination. The door exploded inward, blown off its hinges by a concussive blast. A squad of Harrington's Purity Guard stormed in. They were clad in sleek, white and gold armor, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. They carried strange, rifle-like devices, the suppression weapons B had warned them about. Leading them was a tall, imposing figure in black armor, Commander Valerius. Ash Ketchum, Valerius's voice boomed, synthesized and metallic. "By order of Lord Harrington, you are to surrender immediately. Do not resist." "You know, for a guy staging a coup, you're not very polite," Ash replied, a smirk playing on his lips. "Pikachu, Thunderbolt." Pikachu unleashed a massive bolt of lightning. But the Purity Guard were prepared. They raised their rifles, which projected a shimmering, honeycomb-patterned energy shield. The thunderbolt struck it and dissipated harmlessly. "Your powers are irrelevant, Monarch," Valerius declared. "Our technology neutralizes all Pokémon abilities. Now, surrender." "You neutralized one," Ash said, his smirk widening. He held up a second Pokeball. "But can you neutralize this?" "Jengar, let's get weird." Jengar materialized not in front of them, but from the floor directly beneath the Purity Guard squad. Before they could react, it unleashed a wave of dark, spectral energy. It wasn't a damaging attack. It was Curse. The guard's armor flickered. The suppression fields wavered. Their technology was designed to block external energy attacks, not an insidious, status-inflicting hex from within their own ranks. "Now, Pikachu!" Ash yelled. Pikachu fired another thunderbolt. This time, it tore through the weakened shields, sending half the squad flying, their armor sparking and short-circuiting. Valerius roared in fury. "You'll pay for that. Open fire." The remaining guards fired their rifles. Beams of blue energy shot out, but they weren't attack beams. Jengar and Pikachu were suddenly caught in stasis fields, frozen in place. "I have you now," Valerius sneered, striding forward. "No, you have them," Ash corrected, revealing a third Pokeball. "But you forgot about me." "Lucario, close combat." Lucario appeared in a flash, already in motion. He was a blur of blue and black, his fists and feet a whirlwind of perfectly executed strikes. The Purity Guard, trained to fight Pokémon with technology from a distance, were completely unprepared for a hand-to-hand martial arts master. Lucario moved through them like a storm, disabling them with precise, non-lethal blows to the joints of their armor. In seconds, only Valerius was left standing. He stared in disbelief at his defeated squad, then drew a high-frequency vibroblade from his back. "Fine. I'll deal with you myself, you metal mutt." He lunged at Lucario, the blade humming. But Ash was already a step ahead. "Pikachu, Jengar, break free. Now." The stasis fields were strong, but they weren't absolute. With a combined surge of will, both Pokémon shattered their prisons. Jengar immediately melted into Valerius's shadow, while Pikachu, with incredible speed, zipped onto the commander's back. Valerius felt a sudden, crippling chill from the curse, and a moment later, Pikachu unleashed a point-blank iron tail to the back of his helmet. The commander staggered, his helmet cracking, his system screaming warnings. He swung his blade wildly, but Lucario easily sidestepped it and delivered a final, decisive aura sphere to his chest. Valerius was blasted off his feet, his armor smoking, and crashed into a wall, unconscious. Ash recalled his Pokémon, giving them a quick nod of thanks. He had won the first skirmish. He looked at the chaos, then grinned. Time for Phase 2. Meanwhile, in the bowels of the tower, Bee and Leon were in a running battle. They raced through a concrete service corridor, the air filled with the sounds of alarms and shouting. Zakian and Zamazenta ran with them, their movements fluid and impossibly fast. "They've sealed the main tunnel access," Leon yelled, as a heavy blast door slammed shut in front of them. "Then we make our own door," B retorted. She looked at Zakian. "You're up." Behemoth blade. Zakian didn't need a command. It understood the intent. It leaped forward, its body swelling with Gigantamax energy, the sword in its mouth growing to a colossal, glowing size. It swung once. The multi-ton, reinforced steel door was sliced in two as if it were paper, the edges of the cut glowing cherry red. They burst through into a subterranean transport hub, only to find another squad of Purity Guard waiting, this time with heavy robotic mechs. "My turn," Leon shouted, a fierce grin on his face. He gestured to Zamazenta. "Behemoth bash." Zamazenta charged, its body glowing with the same colossal energy. It became a living projectile, slamming into the mechs with the force of a freight train. The entire hub shook as the mechs were reduced to twisted scrap metal. The guards scattered in terror. Leon and B didn't waste a moment, leading the legendary heroes down a dark tunnel that led toward the stadium. They were almost clear. 50 floors up, Sonia and Nessa reached the server room. The door was maglocked. "Allow me," Sonia said, her fingers flying across her Rotom phone screen. A flurry of code scrolled past. A moment later, the lock clicked open. The room was a cold, humming sanctuary of data, rows upon rows of servers blinking with cold, blue lights. "Okay, I'm in the mainframe," Sonia murmured, plugging her phone into a terminal. "But the files I need are encrypted with something I've never seen. It's like the code is alive. It's rewriting itself as I try to crack it." "How long?" Nessa asked, standing guard at the door, her trusted Toxicroak out and ready. "Too long," Sonia replied, her face pale with concentration. "This isn't just an encryption. It's a logic bomb, laced with the Unraveler's influence. If I make a mistake, it could wipe the entire Galar League database. Forever." Nessa's mind raced. They needed more time. How to buy it? She looked at the emergency broadcast console in the corner of the room. An idea, audacious and risky, sparked in her mind. She walked over to the console, her own fingers flying across the keyboard. She wasn't a hacker like Sonia, but she was a master of media. She knew systems. She bypassed the standard security protocols and jacked her own phone into the broadcast feed. "What are you doing?" Sonia asked, not looking up from her screen. "Creating a diversion," Nessa said with a grim smile. Across Winden, on every public screen, every television, every Rotom phone, the emergency alert message from Harrington vanished. It was replaced by a single, high-definition image, Lord Harrington, at a lavish party, clinking champagne glasses with the disgraced former Chairman Rose, a photo taken just a week before Rose initiated the darkest day. It was an image from Nessa's private collection of opposition research, one she had been saving for the perfect moment. There was no text, no explanation. Just the picture. A seed of doubt, planted in the minds of millions. In his command center in a separate tower, Harrington saw the image and his charming smile vanished, replaced by a snarl of pure rage. "Find her," he roared. "Shut her down." The coup was starting to unravel. Back in the Monarch's suite, Ash was gone. The room was a wreck, filled with unconscious Purity Guards. He was now moving through the tower, a ghost in the machine, using Jengar's phasing abilities and Lucario's aura sense to navigate the corridors, waging a one-man guerrilla war. He wasn't trying to defeat them all. He was just trying to be as loud and disruptive as possible, drawing forces away from the others. He took out communications relays, sabotaged weapon caches, and led squads on wild goose chases through the tower's labyrinthine layout. He was a chaos agent, and he was having the time of his life. The climax came when all three storylines converged. Sonia, beads of sweat on her forehead, let out a triumphant gasp. I'm in. I've broken through. The final piece of the encryption had fallen. And the files that opened on her screen were more damning than she could have imagined. Encrypted communications between Harrington and the Herald. Financial transactions funding the Unraveler cult. A detailed plan to capture Ash and the legendary heroes and use them in a ritual to bind the silent god to Harrington himself on the site of the darkest day. It was all there. Nessa, I have it. At that exact moment, the doors to the server room were blasted open, and a new squad of Purity guards stormed in. But before they could act, Nessa was ready. Toxicroak, poison jab. Her Pokémon moved like lightning, its toxic strike disabling the lead guards. Simultaneously, Leon and Bee burst out of a tunnel into the stadium's massive, empty interior, Zacian and Zamazenta at their heels. But Harrington had anticipated them. The stadium lights flared on, revealing dozens of Purity Guard and heavy mech surrounding them. It was a trap. Looks like the party's here after all, Leon said, a grim smile on his face as he and Bee stood back to back, ready for their last stand. From his command center, Harrington watched his victory unfold on his monitors. His men were about to capture the legends and retake the server room. The brief hiccup was over. Lord Harrington, an aide said, his voice trembling. There's something on the broadcast. Harrington looked at the main screen. The picture of him and Rose was gone. It had been replaced by a live feed. A feed of his own encrypted files, the ones detailing his treason, his cult, his entire monstrous plan, scrolling across the screen for the entire world to see. And beneath the scrolling text, a new image, Harrington's family crest, side by side with the symbol of the star-eating god from the ancient ruins. Sonia hadn't just given the files to Nessa. Nessa had broadcast them. Live. No. Harrington screamed, his face contorted in a mask of pure fury. The effect was instantaneous. In the stadium, the Purity Guard, seeing the proof of their leader's treason, hesitated. Their belief was shattered. In the server room, the guards lowered their weapons, looking at Nessa and Sonia with confusion and horror. And into that moment of hesitation, Ash made his entrance. He crashed through the glass ceiling of the stadium, riding on the back of his Dragonite, a triumphant war cry on his lips. He landed in the center of the field, between his friends and Harrington's wavering army. It's over, Harrington, his voice boomed through the stadium, broadcast to the world. You've lost. From his tower, Harrington watched his army falter, his political power evaporate, his lifelong plan crumble into dust in a matter of seconds. He was no longer a charismatic lord or a visionary leader. He was a traitor. A monster. A fool. He slammed his fist on the console, his face a terrifying rictus of hate. No, he whispered, his voice dangerously calm. It's not over. He looked at a monitor displaying the energy readings from the Hammerlock power plant. If I can't have Galar, then no one can. If I can't control the silence, then I will invite it. He slammed his hand down on a large, red button, a button that should never have been pressed. A button that initiated a catastrophic overload of the Galar particle plant. A button that would release a feast of energy so vast, it would tear a permanent hole in reality. He had lost the game, so he was flipping the board. In the stadium, a terrifying, world-shaking tremor began. The lights flickered and died. A blood-red glow began to emanate from the direction of Hammerlock. They had won the coup. But in his final act of spite, Harrington had just triggered the apocalypse. Chapter 8, The Unraveled Crown. The tremor that shook Winden was not the violent, shuddering quake of an earthquake. It was a deep, resonant hum that vibrated in the bones, a structural groan from the very fabric of reality. The triumphant lights of the stadium died, plunged into an eerie crimson twilight cast by a malevolent glow rising from the distant silhouette of Hammerlock. Lord Harrington, in his final, spiteful act, had not just flipped the board, he had set the world on fire. What was that? Leon yelled over the rising hum, his face pale in the ghastly red light. What did he do? Sonia's voice crackled through Ash's Rotom phone, frantic and filled with terror. He overloaded the Galar particle plant. He initiated a full, uncontrolled energy release. The amount of power being unleashed, it's 100 times greater than your championship battle. He's not just feeding the Unraveler, he's ripping open the door and inviting it in for a banquet. On the stadium's emergency screens, which had flickered back to life, news feeds showed the horrifying scene at Hammerlock. The iconic stadium city was wreathed in red lightning. At its peak, directly above the tower that housed the power plant, the sky was tearing apart. It wasn't a storm. It was a wound in the universe, a non-Euclidean vortex of swirling, absolute blackness, edged with the sickening violet of the Unraveler's energy. It was the Great Silence, given form. From this gaping maw in reality, things began to emerge. They were not Pokemon, but horrifying, distorted parodies. An echo of a Rayquaza, its serpentine body disjointed and held together by strands of violet energy. A ghostly trio of Regis, their forms translucent and their movements jerky and unnatural. These were not living creatures, they were memories of legendary Pokemon, given monstrous life by the Unraveler's will, a spectral army pouring from the rift. And at their head, floating before the vortex, was the Herald of Nothing. No longer a man in furs, his form was now a shimmering, unstable pillar of pure void energy, his violet eyes burning like twin dying stars. He had become the Unraveler's prime vessel, the general of its army of echoes. The feast begins, his voice echoed, not through speakers, but directly in the minds of every person in Galar. A telepathic broadcast of pure despair. The song of this world will end. All will be silence. In Winden Stadium, the Purity Guard, their chain of command and their entire worldview shattered, simply stood frozen, staring at the harbinger of their own destruction on the screens. There was no time for shock. No time for fear. This is it, Ash said, his voice cutting through the rising panic. He turned to his friends, his expression one of absolute, unwavering resolve. This is the last battle. There are no second chances. Zacian and Zamazenta stepped forward, their bodies glowing, their gazes fixed on the distant threat. They knew. Leon, be your Galar's shield, Ash commanded, his voice ringing with the authority of the monarch. Take Zamazenta. Get to Hammerlock. Your job is to hold the line. The GDF, the gym leaders, every trainer you can rally, they will follow you. Protect the city. Protect the people. Do not let those things break through. Bee nodded, her face grim but resolute. This was a command she understood, a purpose she was born for. Leon, the former champion, looked at the hopeless odds, then at the unwavering determination in Ash's eyes, and gave a fierce, pride-filled grin. Let's give them a champion time they'll never forget. Sonia, Nessa, you're the voice, Ash said, turning to them. You need to coordinate. From right here. This stadium is the most secure comms hub in the region. Sonia, you're the strategist. Analyze that rift. Find a weakness, a structural flaw, anything. I don't care how. Nessa, you're the heart. You need to rally the people. Get on every screen, every phone. Give them hope. Remind them what they're fighting for. A terrified army is a defeated army. Don't let them be defeated. Sonia's hands were trembling, but her eyes were sharp with focus. I can do that. Nessa looked at him, her expression a mixture of fear and fierce pride. She simply nodded, her jaw set. What about you? Leon asked, the same question as before, but this time, the answer was terrifyingly different. Ash looked toward the rift, toward the herald. He reached out and placed a hand on Zacian's head. The hero of Galar met his gaze, an ancient, powerful understanding passing between them. I'm the sword, Ash said. I'm going to cut the heart out of this thing. He tossed a poke ball, and Dragonite appeared, roaring his readiness. I'm going to the source. There were no goodbyes. There was no time. Leon and Bee, with Zamazenta at their side, sprinted from the stadium, their voices already barking orders into their comms, rallying the scattered GDF and the confused Purity Guard, forging a new army from the ashes of the old. Sonia and Nessa ran for the stadium's master control room, a fortified bunker designed to withstand a catastrophe. They had a different kind of war to fight. Ash climbed onto Dragonite's back, Pikachu leaping onto his shoulder, a small, golden beacon of defiance. Let's go, buddy. With a powerful thrust of its wings, Dragonite launched into the blood-red sky, flying straight towards Hammerlock, a single warrior against an army of gods. The battlefield at Hammerlock was a scene from a nightmare. The city was a war zone. Leon and Bee had performed a miracle, organizing a desperate, citywide defense. Gym leaders from across the region had answered the call. Raihan was battling the echo of Rayquaza amidst the city's spires, his Duraludin a match for the spectral dragon. Kabuz Centiskorch was a wall of fire, holding back a tide of smaller, corrupted Pokémon. The Galar Defense Force, their ranks swelled by the now loyal Purity Guard, fought with a desperate courage, their technological weapons, once symbols of oppression, now vital tools of survival. At the center of it all was Bee, fighting alongside Zamazenta. She was the anchor of the entire defensive line. Zamazenta's dauntless shield was a fortress, its behemoth bash shattering the forms of the spectral Regis. Beside it, Bee and her Macamp were a blur of motion, a perfect fusion of discipline and power, protecting Zamazenta's flanks, her presence an inspiration to every trainer on the field. She was no longer just a warrior, she was a guardian, the unbreachable shield of Galar. From the command center, Nessa's voice was a clarion call of hope broadcast across the region. She wasn't the polished model or the cool-headed politician. Her voice was raw, emotional, and fierce. She spoke of Holbury, of courage, of community. She showed live footage of trainers protecting their neighbors, of Pokémon shielding children. She wasn't giving orders, she was telling a story, the story of Galar's heart, a story of a people who would not break. Sonia, meanwhile, was fighting a war of intellect. The rift was not just a hole, it was a complex, multidimensional wound. Its energy patterns were chaotic, nonsensical. But she saw a flicker of a pattern, a rhythmic pulse at its core. It has a heart, Ash, she transmitted, her voice strained. The Herald. He's not just the general, he's the focal point. The entire structure of the rift is anchored to his presence. But it's not stable. It's a paradox. To destroy it, you'd need to counteract its very nature. Ash and Dragonite arrived, a golden streak in the red sky. He didn't join the fray below. He flew straight up, towards the vortex, towards the Herald. The loud one comes, the Herald's voice echoed in his mind. Come to be silenced. Come to be undone. The spectral army turned its attention to him. The echo of Rayquaza abandoned its fight with Raihan and shot towards him, its mouth open to unleash a blast of void energy. Ash didn't flinch. Zacian, it's time. He leaped from Dragonite's back, plummeting through the air. Zacian, who had been flying unseen in their shadow, shot past him. The sword of the hero met the spectral dragon head-on. Zacian swung its blade. The cut was clean, silent, and absolute. It didn't just damage the echo, it severed its connection to the Unraveler. The monstrous form dissolved into dust. Ash landed gracefully back on Dragonite, Zacian now at his side, and they faced the Herald. You can't win, Ash projected back, his own will a shield against the Herald's despair. You're about nothing. Emptiness. But we are about everything else. The battle that followed was one of legend, a clash of concepts fought in the skies above a burning city. Ash, with Pikachu on his shoulder, Dragonite as his mount, and Zacian as his sword, took on the Herald and his personal guard of spectral legends. It was a symphony of perfectly coordinated chaos. Ash was the conductor, his bond with his Pokémon so deep it was telepathic. He didn't need to shout commands. A thought, a feeling, an instinct, that was all it took. Dragonite's Draco Meteor countered a blast of shadow from an echo of Giratina. Pikachu's 10 million volt thunderbolt, amplified by the raw energy in the air, vaporized the spectral Regis. And Zacian. Zacian was sublime. Its blade moved like light, not just cutting, but erasing the Unraveler's influence, undoing its corruption with every strike. But the Herald was powerful. It warped space, turning Ash's attacks against him, creating pocket dimensions, throwing blasts of pure anti-energy. For every echo Ash and Zacian destroyed, 2 more poured from the rift. The defensive line below was beginning to buckle under the sheer numbers. Ash, I don't have a solution. Sonia's voice cried over the comm, desperate. According to every model, you can't destroy the rift. Any massive energy release will just make it bigger. You can't fight entropy with force. You need an act of pure creation to counteract it. But that's impossible. An act of creation. The words echoed in Ash's mind. He looked at the endless tide of nothingness pouring from the sky. He looked at the city below, at his friends fighting and dying. He looked at Pikachu on his shoulder, at Zacian by his side. Force wasn't the answer. Overwhelming power wasn't the answer. But what if Sonia was wrong? What if it wasn't about creating something from nothing? What if it was about reinforcing what was already there? He looked at the bond between himself and Pikachu. The trust he shared with Zacian. The faith he had in his friends below. BEA's unbreakable will. Nessa's indomitable heart. Sonia's brilliant mind. Leon's redeemed courage. These things were real. They were forces of nature in their own right. They were the song the Unraveler wanted to silence. A final, desperate, impossible plan formed in his mind. Sonia, you're a genius, he transmitted, a strange calm settling over him. Everyone. Listen to me. I need your help. His voice cut through the chaos, broadcast by Nessa to every comm link, every phone. I can't destroy the rift, he said. But we can heal it. The Unraveler is entropy. Silence. Nothing. The opposite of that isn't just power. It's connection. It's harmony. It's the bond between a trainer and their Pokémon. Below, Bee heard his words. She looked at Zamazenta, then at her Macamp. She understood. Nessa, in the bunker, looked at her Toxicroak. Sonia looked at her Yamper. Leon, atop a broken-down mech, looked at his Charizard, who had just rejoined the fight. I need you to give me your strength, Ash's voice rang out. Not your power. Not your attacks. I need your bond. Focus on your Pokémon. Feel the trust, the love, the journey you've shared. All of you. Every trainer in Galar. Pour that feeling, that harmony, into the world. Let's show this thing what a real song sounds like. It was an insane request. But they had seen him perform miracles. They trusted him. Across the battlefield, across the Galar region, a strange and beautiful thing happened. The fighting paused. Trainers turned to their Pokémon. A million silent conversations, a million shared memories, a million bonds of love and trust and shared struggle, all rising as one. A high-frequency hum began to fill the air, not of energy, but of emotion. A harmonic frequency of pure, unadulterated connection. Ash closed his eyes. He reached out, not with his hands, but with his soul. He felt it. The rising tide of emotion. He gathered it, focused it, drew it into himself. The power of the monarch was not his own strength, it was his ability to connect, to amplify the bonds of others. The herald sensed the shift. Meaningless sentiment. A final, pathetic noise before the silence. It unleashed a final, massive blast of void energy, aimed to extinguish Ash forever. Ash opened his eyes. They were blazing with a rainbow of light. He held up his hand, and the strength of every trainer in Galar, the love for every Pokémon, coalesced around him. It formed a shield, not of energy, but of pure, conceptual reality. The blast of nothingness hit it and dissolved, unable to find purchase on something so fundamentally real. Now, Zacian, Ash whispered. He poured all the gathered harmony, all the love, all the connection, into the hero's sword. The blade blazed with a gentle, brilliant white light that banished the crimson twilight. "This is how it ends," Ash declared, his voice one with the million trainers of Galar. "Not with a bang. But with a song." Zacian shot forward. It didn't strike the herald. It plunged its blade of pure harmony into the heart of the rift itself. There was no explosion. There was only light. A warm, healing, golden light that spread from the rift, washing over the battlefield. The echoes did not shatter, they faded peacefully, like memories. The corrupted ground healed. The red sky turned to a gentle blue. The wound in the universe did not tear or break. It simply closed. Healed, like a cut that was no longer infected. The Herald of Nothing gave one last, surprised look, a flicker of something almost human in its eyes, as the harmony washed over it. And then, it was gone, its song of silence drowned out by the symphony of a million bonded souls. In the aftermath, a profound, peaceful silence fell over Hammerlock. The sun broke through the clouds, a new dawn for a world that had been saved. Ash, drained but alive, floated gently to the ground, his Pokémon gathering around him. He had done it. Weeks later, in a Winden that was busy rebuilding, a special session of the Galar League Council was held. The motion was unanimous. The Guardian Clause, the archaic law that had started everything, was permanently and irrevocably repealed. Ash, Sonia, Nessa, and Bee stood together before the council. They were free. The cage was gone. That evening, they stood on the balcony of the monarch's suite, looking out over the healing city. Leon was with them. The 5 pillars of Galar's victory. "So," Leon said, a cheerful grin on his face. "What now? You're all free. No forced marriage. No council. You can all go back to your lives." Bee looked at the others, a rare, small smile on her face. "I find my life has become significantly more interesting recently." "My brand has never been stronger," Nessa added, a teasing glint in her eye as she leaned lightly against Ash's side. "The public loves a hero. And I find I'm rather fond of this one myself." Sonia pushed a stray strand of hair from her face. "And I've just discovered an entirely new field of metaphysical science. I'm going to need a research partner who has some hands-on experience with reality bending." She looked at Ash, her expression open and warm. Ash looked at the 3 incredible women beside him. The warrior, the star, the scholar. They were no longer his prize. They were his partners. His friends. His family. The law had tried to force a bond upon them, but in fighting it, in fighting for each other, they had forged something far stronger, far more real. The crown had been a prison. But what they had built together, in its place, was a home. "I think," Ash said, putting his arms around Nessa and Sonia, his eyes meeting Bea's over their shoulders, a genuine, happy smile on his face, "I'll stick around Galar for a while." The future was uncertain. New threats would surely rise. But for the first time, the monarch of the World Coronation Series was not alone. He was part of a fellowship, bound not by an ancient, unraveled crown, but by a choice. And together, they were ready for whatever came next. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.